standing.
May I welcome members and the viewing public to this meeting of the City Council. Before commencing on the formal business on the agenda, the newly elected councillor for Stannington Ward, who is attending his first meeting of the full council since his election on the 18th of January, is to be introduced to the council meeting. And Penny Baker is going to introduce Will Saffwell. Thank you for that. And now can I ask the General Counsel, David Hollis, to announce the housekeeping arrangements?
Getting there in the end, Lord Mayor. Can I have your attention whilst I make a few housekeeping announcements? Please can I request members of the public to familiarise themselves with the fire safety and evacuation notices displayed in the public gallery. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, please take instruction from the security attendants who will be in attendance throughout the meeting. Please can I request everyone to switch mobile devices to silent mode so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. The meeting today will be webcast and the recording will also be available for people to view later through the Council's website. It is also possible that Sheffield Live TV will record and rebroadcast this meeting. Photography, video and sound recording of the meeting is permitted, but the Lord Mayor does have discretion to withdraw or suspend this permission if the recording is disrupting the conduct of the meeting or is being undertaken in a manner which could capture personal information, or if a member of the public participating objects to being recorded. Any member of the public due to speak at the meeting who does not wish to be recorded should say so at the start of their speech, and the Lord Mayor will suspend permission to record their contribution. For safety reasons, please may I request that recording equipment is not held over the balcony. Finally, although there are no longer any specific COVID safety measures to adhere to, individuals are very welcome to wear a face covering within the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I'll conclude these housekeeping announcements by stating that the meeting is scheduled to finish at 5:30 p.m, but at some appropriate point in the afternoon, I will adjourn proceedings to give members an opportunity for a comfort break. Item 2 on the agenda is apologies for absence. So far I've had apologies from the following members: Mike Chaplin, Lewis Chinchin, Laura Moynihan, Joe Orton, Alison Norris, Abdul Qayyum, Gary Wetherill. Are there any further apologies?
Is that? Is he? He can't resist the chance to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Rooney, for your non-helpful intervention.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, one more. Apologies from Councillor Malachi Hayby too.
Thank you. Actually, at this point, I want to... Mary?
Yeah, Councillor Mazarick-Bell as well, please.
Okay, Mazarick-Bell. At this point, I want to make particular mention of the absence of Alison Norris, that I think we all know as a member of the council. She was involved in that tragic incident in Burngreave a few weeks ago, and it didn't become apparent actually that who the victims were for the first few days. I have been in correspondence with Alison and conveyed the best wishes of the full council to her, and hope that she's back in circulation before too long. Chris Marriott, who was the victim of that attack, his wife is actually a council officer, and I think I also want to record my deepest condolences to the Marriott family at this juncture in this horrible incident that happened in Sheffield, and I'm sure all members of the council want to endorse that. Thank you. Can I also say at this point a number of members and officers will be leaving early today, myself included, because there's a bit of a do on this evening for the MOBO Awards, and some of us will have to leave early to get there on time for that. So we'll find out where we are in the agenda when that happens. Thank you. So item number 3 on the agenda is exclusion of the press and public, and there are no items of business on the agenda for the meeting where resolutions may be moved to exclude the press and public. Item 4 is declarations of interest, and this item of business is to enable members of the council to declare an interest in any item on the agenda. Does that apply to any members? No, thank you. Manesh?
Lord Mayor, the amendment to the Green Motion references my employer.
Who is Olivia Blake MP? Yeah. Okay, so that is recorded. Next item on the agenda is public questions and petitions and other communications. Just about Lord Mayor's communications, I just want to say something about what I've mentioned already, the MOBO Awards. That I know quite a number of members have dipped into the events at the Crucible on Monday, there was at the City Hall yesterday, and especially this morning, I know a number of you were able, in between meetings, to see what was going on in the Winter Gardens rather this morning. I was able to be there for over an hour, seeing the young people performing and the vibrancy about the place and the stalls. I think this has shown what a major event this is for the city, and how all communities have really got involved in it. And the way that the Chief Executive was just showing me a video beforehand of the involvement of hundreds, literally hundreds of school children right across the city in this, and the way that it's engaged all strands of the community. And it's really been a pleasure to be involved in it and to see it and to celebrate the whole event, and the fact that we're really looking forward to tonight. And talking about that, we go on with the Lunar New Year celebrations, which are coming into place Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and on to Tuesday. And we're up in the game with the Lunar New Year celebrations this year, in that on Sunday there will be a dragon parade from the town hall into the Peace Gardens, and there will be stalls in the Peace Gardens. And so that just shows again another strand of the Sheffield communities, how we're engaging with them. And again, I hope as many people as possible can engage with that. And the other note I've got is there is going to be a charity fashion show taking place in the town hall. And again, Gail, please prompt me on the date. 22nd of March in the town hall. Information is available from myself, Gail, or Glynis Chapman, and again, it's for the charity fundraising, my own and Gail's charity, as a past Lord Mayor and present Lord Mayor, and we hope people will engage in that. It's been very successful in previous years. Okay, thank you for indulging me in those announcements, but I think it's right that I use this opportunity to celebrate what is going on in our different communities in Sheffield. We now move to petitions and public questions. Public questions can be asked and petitions can be presented at council meetings. We encourage questions or petitions to be submitted 2 clear days in advance of the meetings to help public attendance to be managed in a safe and orderly way at the meeting and to assist members to provide responses or answers. Petitions or questions received after the submissions deadline shall be presented or asked at the meeting at my discretion as chair of the meeting. For this meeting, there is 1 petition to be presented and questions have been received from 19 members of the public. Now, there's just a total of 60 minutes for all the petitions and public questions, and I've just said there are a large number of public questions. Can people asking the public questions bear in mind that we don't want to deprive people at the end of the queue, as it were, the chance to ask their questions? So some of the questions have got rather a large preamble. Please be mindful of that and perhaps cut that down and get to the heart of your question as quickly as possible, and that gives everybody a chance to have their say. Okay, so can I call upon the Chief Executive to announce the petition, and may I request the petitioner keep to the time limit of 3 minutes, and also in responding to questions and petitions that committee chairs keep to a maximum, and I've said this before, maximum of 5 minutes. That is a maximum, not a target, the 5-minute response. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I've received a petition and an e-petition containing 1,129 signatures in total, calling on the Council to act now on race equality by creating a dedicated Black, Asian minority, ethnic and refugee organisations community infrastructure fund. The organiser of both petitions, Emily Wilson, wishes to address the Council. It's recommended that the petition is referred to the Leader of the Council and Chair of Strategy and Resources Policy Committee, Councillor Tom Hunt, for a response.
Thank you. First, a massive thank you to Jeff Green, the Emeritus Professor of Urban Policy and the CEOs of the 5 leading Black and ethnic minority organisations across our city who've helped develop the proposal behind this petition, and for all their work to make our city stronger and more resilient. I started this petition to help them access a democratic mechanism for making their voice heard on an issue that matters to them and indeed our whole city. They'd been raising the idea about allocating council funds to support equity-led community infrastructure for some time. Equity-led community infrastructure is led by and for communities facing structural inequality, and it can be a powerful equaliser. It lifts the burden on statutory services, drives innovation, and unlocks overlooked potential to solve problems within communities themselves. It is a cutting-edge idea, but it's not radical. Lots of organisations and other local governments are already implementing this in the UK and beyond. Unfortunately, in Sheffield, we've come up against closed doors. We've been trying to engage with the council to explore ways to use community infrastructure levy funds to invest in social infrastructure alongside roads and transports for over 18 months. The council has consistently struggled to engage in useful dialogue with these communities and to look at and adapt models that are being used successfully in other parts of the country. It shouldn't take a petition with over 1,000 signatures to get new, innovative ideas raised by key community organisations on the table. And whether the goal is achieved via SIL or some other mechanism is less important than the council finding a way to properly invest in the social infrastructure that it relies on to provide support to these communities. Instead of blaming factors outside the council's control when our services fail, it's time to use the assets that we already have to build more cost-effective, equitable and resilient models of community infrastructure that can deliver even when times are tough. In the wake of the Race Equality Report, it's even more important that the Council invest serious time and money in solving these problems and listening to these communities. I know this petition was met with horror by many local politicians. Communities following democratic processes to raise concerns and share ideas should never be perceived as a threat. We should celebrate the fact that our city has everything it needs to rise to the challenges it faces. And those answers are within our incredible diverse communities. In summary, all the answers, potential and resources we need to build a stronger Sheffield already exist within our communities. And it's time for the council to stop being a gatekeeper and start enabling us to create the city we deserve. And that starts with concrete investment in equity-led community infrastructure, using funding the council already controls to leverage other investment. It starts with the council acting as a connector and a convener for our city, and with our political leadership focusing on enabling civic voice and power rather than policing it. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call upon Councillor Tom Hunt to respond to that petition.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Emily, for bringing this petition today to create a dedicated BAMER Community Infrastructure Fund. Thank you to everybody who signed the petition, and also thank you to all of the organisations that have been mentioned, Emily, by yourself there. I've visited many of your organisations, spoken at length about the important work that you do, and we want to enable you to be more successful than you currently are. I want to take this opportunity to restate that as leader of the council, I will do all I can to eradicate all forms of racism in our city. My commitment to supporting the council and the city to become an anti-racist city is unconditional. We are currently looking at how we support and engage the breadth of our city's diverse, voluntary and community sector and faith organisations. That work aims to improve the work that the council does with BCS and faith partners and reshape the relationship so that we are consistently engaging with a breadth of diverse voices and within a diverse sector, some of whom I know do not feel like their voices are heard or that there is equitable access to the council and its resources. The strength of the VCS and faith sector is in its variety, its diversity, and this work will not look to drive structure or uniformity within the sector, as that would damage the value that it brings. In response to the feedback that we've received from organisations, some of whom are here today and others, and in line with our commitment to openness and honesty, the council has agreed to publish more information about who receives grants from the council and to look to ensure that we have the right support available. I want to ensure that BAMER organisations in this city have equitable access to funding to help support their work and for them to flourish as outlined in the recommendations made by the Race Equality Commission. I've asked officers to work as a matter of urgency to consider the issues that are raised in the petition, and this work is happening, and I will also ask that a report comes forward to the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee, if possible, and I would like this to be considered by the committee in March. I want to ensure that all the organisations here and BAMER organisations in the city are involved in this work and engaged about any possible proposed changes. And we've got a meeting in the diary with the BAMER 5 organisations on February the 21st, when that'll be an opportunity to have more of this conversation. So I look forward to the discussion today, but thank you for coming today, and thank you to everybody who signed this important petition. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to the public questions, and again, please bear in mind what I urged before about being succinct. First question is from Val Wilson.
Sorry about that.
Do you want to ask your question now?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Lord Mayor. Good afternoon, Lord Mayor and councillors and everyone. I'm here to remind you about my plight for my bungalow, because I was ill last year and I have been for a lot of months. But I just want to remind you about the plaque on my bungalow for this year, which will be 51 years. So I hope you still got it in mind to do it, please. I think I deserve it after all that time from 1973.
Okay, thank you. I think we all remember. I think we all remember your previous visit to this council, Val. I'm going to ask the Chair of Housing, Councillor Douglas Johnson, to respond.
Thanks very much. As the Lord Mayor says, we all remember when you came before and asked for a plaque on your house there. At the time, if you remember, I said it's not something that the full council discussing, and I referred it on to the 3 ward councillors who live in your area there. And I believe I understand they have been doing something with it. I've heard from Councillor Dale that they've been in discussions with the local housing office. So I'm hoping you'll hear more from them in the near future. And hopefully it won't have to have 52 years when you come back next time.
Okay, thank you. The second question is from David Cronshaw. Is David here? I take it that David isn't here. Okay, the question will be recorded in the minutes and a written answer will be there. Can I then move on to Ruth Hubbard?
Hello. Good afternoon, Lord Mayor. I know you've refused my emergency question about media reports yesterday about council lying again, but I couldn't get it in earlier because it was only in the media yesterday. But my first question is, at the beginning of February, it's the beginning of February, and very soon I'm aware we'll start to see what is for many the unedifying spectacle of the lead up to local elections and the grab for local power. We sadly remain firmly behind the curve in moving towards more appropriate election cycles. Can I firstly request the approximate cost to the council of running an annual round of local elections? But I'm primarily concerned with the conduct of local elections. Last year, the actions of one candidate, without revealing they were a candidate, necessitated police intervention from specialist harassment officers. This was because of the candidate's intimidating messages to a community group who simply sought to share legitimate local information to their local community. Can I please confirm with the leader that there will not be a repeat of any such behaviour by any candidate this year, his commitment to free and fair local elections, and the rights of community groups to freedom of expression, which includes their right to share information?
Do you want to ask your second question now?
Okay. Well, I've been tracking the council's follow-up to the Fargate container project. A partially redacted internal audit report has been received at Audit and Standards Committee that identified a catalogue of failures: procurement, management of the contractor, governance and planning controls, decision-making, financial controls and monitoring, stakeholder engagement and communication, risk management. There's a clear public interest in elected members exercising explicit and committed oversight over how council systems operate and to try and prevent similar episodes recurring. However, the Audit and Standards Committee has chosen twice now not to endorse the recommendations and actions identified in the internal audit report on the adjustments being made within the council. The problem for some members of Audit and Standards Committee seems to be that they really want to be able to put more emphasis on who was responsible, and in particular the political context in pushing through decisions on the project. There is also a public interest here, of course. Whilst it's been made clear that further action has taken place in relation to individual council officer roles through the project, it's not clear what actions have been taken by politicians in relation to their role and their accountability. Audit and Standards could have could have recommended that Strategy and Resources have further discussion here following the internal audit report. about the political context for Fargate, and I'm not sure why they didn't do this. So in terms of the public interest, we're in a very unsatisfactory situation. We've got elected members who haven't exercised oversight over council systems, nor have we got the political discussion to talk about political accountability. Elected members in audit and standards have refused to exercise the role they're supposed to play, but nor have they provided a mechanism whereby political errors or failures might be understood better and addressed or mitigated for the future. So where will weaknesses or failures in political decision-making or scrutiny systems be addressed in light of the Fargate container project? The formative decisions on the project took place under the old executive leadership arrangements, and about which there's almost no public information at all. Although there are certainly some remaining questions about the role of personal political connections and potential conflicts of interest in the project. But it's also no secret that, at least in my view, there was and remains a real lack of attention to how proper scrutiny functions have been brought into the new constitution and committee system. Who and where is addressing these questions, and in light of the container project, to ensure that the public interest is being served?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Councillor Tom Hunt to respond, but also as Chair of the Audit Committee, Councillor Mohammed Maroof to respond to the second question. Councillor Hunt first.
Thank you very much, Ruth, for your questions. The cost of running elections fluctuate every year, and that kind of depends on the precise pattern of those elections, and in particular whether they're combined with another election like a Police and Crime Commissioner election. But what we can say is, with those caveats, the cost for the City Council of a standalone City Council election, as happened in 2023, is around £940,000. On your second point, look, as leader of the council, I expect all candidates and agents from all parties to behave in a lawful and respectful manner, and I'm sure that all parties in this chamber, and I hope those who are not here, would also agree. In Sheffield, we have a history of positive, respectful campaigning, and I very much hope that this will continue in this year's elections. Each year, the returning officer supports this process by inviting all election candidates and agents to an online briefing, and amongst the topics covered in there are elections campaigning, specific offences that can occur, the Electoral Commission Code of Conduct for campaigners, and the role of South Yorkshire Police in investigating any breach of the election law. Candidates and agents are asked by the returning officer to abide by the Code of Conduct and to report any issues during the campaign if they believe an offence has taken place to South Yorkshire Police. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mohammed Maroof.
See, auditing standard doesn't speak that often, so we don't use the microphone that much. But today we do have centre stage here. I think we had a fairly healthy debate within audit and standards itself, and quite rightly so, because I think it is a subject that is of huge public interest. But what we did do on the 1st of February at the Audit and Standards Committee is in fact note the findings and recommendations of the internal audit report into the containers project. In particular, it noted that 14 critical recommendations identified by the internal audit have been implemented, are now in the Green Audit Tracker report. Having said that, as the question notes, it's important that the Council is open and transparent, quite rightly so, at all times, and in particular when things go wrong. And we've seen quite a number of people raise questions here where things have actually gone wrong, and we should be learning from that. The Audit and Standards Committee has carried out its functions properly and responsibly, recognising that its primary responsibility is in ensuring, as you said at the meeting, that the Council's governance and control arrangements are working properly and providing oversight to the Council's risk management arrangements. Having said that, the wider issues of service performance are for the relevant policy committee, and for Strategy and Resources Committee in its overall corporate role to look into. So you're correct there as well. The effectiveness of the Council's oversight and scrutiny arrangements overall is for Governance Committee to consider and make recommendations to full Council. So I think I've clarified the situation, what we did at Audit and Standards. But thank you for asking the question, and thank you for giving Audit and Standards the opportunity to stand up. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next question is from Isabel O'Leary.
Thank you. Following the Council's apology to the courts for misleading the courts in 2 cases, does the Council have any message for other local authorities about the wisdom, or otherwise, of misusing public money to take out injunctions against environmental protesters? Thank you.
Thank you. Can Councillor Tom Hunt respond, please?
Thank you very much for your question. Sir Mark Lowcock's report into the street tree dispute was clear that the council strategy at the time of taking out injunctions was ineffective in deterring protesters or resolving opposition to the Streets Ahead programme, as well as failing to resolve the dispute. Relying on legal solutions caused the council wider reputational damage, as well as costing a significant amount of money that could have been used to fund compromise solutions to the dispute. We've learned from our experience that a collaborative, respectful, but appropriately challenging partnership approach based on mutual trust and understanding has delivered more for the city and its street trees than was achieved through 4 years of dispute when a different approach was taken.
Thank you. Next question is from Dave Dillner.
Lord Mayor, members, good afternoon. Will the council leader agree with me that it is highly regrettable that nobody has yet been held to account for the mismanagement, etc., highlighted by the Lowcock report? Thank you.
Again, can I call upon Councillor Hunt to respond?
Thank you very much for your question. It's good to see you again. As we've discussed ourselves before, Sir Mark was clear in his report that the council's behaviour during the dispute amounted to a serious and sustained failure of strategic leadership at both the political and officer level. The council has apologised publicly on a number of occasions for that failure of leadership and for the harms that have been caused. One of the first things I did as leader was issue a full and frank public apology to the people of Sheffield for what happened, and personal apologies have been issued. None of the politicians or senior officers who were in post at that time remain in positions of responsibility in the authority today. The council has been clear throughout that it has no power to hold former employees directly to account or to require them to apologise for what happened during the dispute. And similarly, elected members cannot be compelled to resign. The ballot box is the mechanism for voters to hold elected members to account.
Thank you. The next questions are from Justin Buxton, but I believe they're going to be presented on his behalf by Mark James.
Good afternoon, Mayor. Yes, an echo of the trees dispute again. There's been a bit of back and forth on the drafting of this question. I'll try and read it as clearly as I can because it is quite technical. So this is Justin's question. Did the council seek a barrister's opinion at any point in order to inform their apology for misleading courts to the Lord High Chancellor? Signed by 2 very senior officers, both with a significant role in this matter? Or did the signatories rely solely upon the solicitor's view furnished to Sir Mark Lowcock and subsequently published in his report that the fake deliberately misleading and contractually irrelevant 5-year strategy document, which was falsely and intentionally presented as a legitimate revision of a contractual document, actually authored by Sheffield City Council rather than Amy, as per section 6.34 and Annex 3 of the Streets Ahead contract. Did it have any bearing upon the resultant judgments referred to, and I refer back to previous questions, as the solicitors engaged apparently believe and advised? I will email this redraft to Democratic Services if Justin hasn't done it already. But I would observe, as one of the tree protesters, I shouldn't really be here asking this question.
Okay, thank you for the question. And again, Councillor Hunt to respond.
Thank you very much for asking Mr Buxton's questions. The short answer is no. The Council did not seek a barrister's advice. As the apology itself made clear, the Council had not seen the advice that was given to Sir Mark's inquiry, other than the conclusions that were published in the inquiry report. The Council's General Counsel considered the point himself prior to the apology being made.
The next question is from Lynn Chapman.
Hang on a second. I'd like to ask what steps will be taken this year to make bus travel more attractive to the Sheffield public?
Yes, a very pertinent question there. Councillor Ben Miskell to respond.
Thank you very much for your question. We're really excited about this year ahead because together with Mayor Oliver Coppard, we've got an exciting vision to bring buses and trams back under public control. And I'm pleased that trams will be brought back under public control on the 22nd of March. We know that our region has been getting a very rough deal when it comes to buses from our government. And since bus deregulation in the 1980s, South Yorkshire's bus network has been run by private companies who choose when to run services, what services to keep going, and how much to charge for fares. When services are cut and passengers are let down, these decisions are taken by private operators. Meanwhile, we know that fares have surged by 51%, almost twice as fast as wages since 2010, putting high pressure on passengers. In addition, more than 15% of bus services have been cut in the last year alone across South Yorkshire. That is what a deregulated bus system looks like, and it is why we are working to change it. Under Oliver's leadership, the Mayoral Combined Authority is currently going through an assessment process for a bus franchising scheme for Sheffield and South Yorkshire, and that will bring regulation of our bus routes, the frequencies, the fares and the tickets under local public control, as Greater Manchester has done under Labour leadership. Now, it's really important to say that we can't prejudge the decision, but this work is being done very quickly and being done as quickly as possible. And we've also submitted an ambitious bid in January as part of Zebra 2, which is a pot of funding, which, if the government choose to back our vision, will deliver 65 electric buses in Sheffield. Now, I'm really excited about the year ahead, and we are, of course, hopeful for a general election that happens soon, and that real possibility of a Labour government which will rejuvenate public transport in Sheffield and this region.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. The next question is from Hilary Smith. What is your point of order? Which section of the Constitution?
I haven't memorised it. I'll take your guidance on which section of the Constitution it is, Lord Mayor, again. I'm just questioning that I believe in the Constitution that when chairs answer questions, either from the public or members, they're answering those questions on behalf of the committee. This answer clearly seemed to be on behalf of the Labour Party.
I take your point to some extent, but clearly this City Council is a political forum as well, and whilst I sometimes wish it wasn't quite as political, unfortunately some people will take the opportunity on all sides to make political points, and all parties cannot claim innocence on this respect. Thank you. So, Hilary Smith.
Firstly, I'm very disappointed that my colleague's question regarding the Council's position on apartheid has been disallowed, given that the Council passed a motion relating to Sheffield's anti-apartheid coalition in November. Surely the question of apartheid is relevant. My question is, the International Court of Justice has ruled that there's a plausible case of genocide against Israel for committing the crime of genocide against the Palestinian people. Israel's been told that it must refrain from any acts that can be considered genocide. Israel's ignored that ruling and continues indiscriminate bombing. I'll summarise the question.
Sorry. Can you just go back a little bit from the microphone to stop the distortion? Thank you.
This means that the government, any government, institution or business that is aiding Israel's attack in Gaza could be complicit in acts of genocide being committed by Israel. This is a matter for Sheffield Council, which could be included in this complicity. Sheffield's part of South Yorkshire Pension Authority and the Border to Coast Pension Partnership. Sheffield Council is therefore indirectly investing in arms companies selling weapons to Israel. These investments include Airbus, BAE Systems, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Rolls-Royce and other companies. South Yorkshire Pensions Authority also invests in Barclays and HSBC Bank, both of which fund companies involved in the production of weapons being sold to Israel. These investments are potentially making Sheffield Council complicit in war crimes and genocide, and pension holders have repeatedly requested that Sheffield seeks ways to divest from these companies. I'm fully aware that Sheffield Council is unable to divest from these companies without achieving wider agreement with other authorities. Will Sheffield Council, though, make a statement about these investments and possible complicity in war crimes and take it forward to the Pension Authority and Border to Coast? And what other steps will Sheffield Council take to work towards the Pensions Authority and Borders to Coast reducing their potential complicity in war crimes against the Palestinian people?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you very much, Hilary, for your question. And we had a positive and constructive conversation a few weeks ago when you came with other members of the Sheffield Coalition to discuss your concerns with myself and other senior officers and members. And I fully recognise the significant concerns that you and others continue to raise about the deeply distressing humanitarian situation in Gaza. I heard those concerns myself firsthand at the Justice Now demonstration when I visited and spoke to the protesters outside the front of the town hall last month. A report is due to be coming to the Strategy and Resources Committee meeting on February the 21st, which will provide an update regarding the Council's actions relating to the ongoing conflict. And that will be informed by the discussion that we and others had on January the 19th. I'm keen to have another conversation with you and other members of the coalition ahead of the Strategy and Resources Committee, and I've emailed you and others this morning to offer another meeting to have that conversation, ideally later this week if that's possible. On the subject of South Yorkshire Pension Authority, I need to be clear that the Council does not administer or have any direct influence over how pension funds are invested. The funds belong to the employees and ex-employees who are members of the pension fund, and the scheme is administered on their behalf by the Pensions Authority. Members of the Pensions Authority have to act in the best financial interests of its members and beneficiaries at all time when they're acting in their capacity as pensions authority members. Although appointed by the council, they're not representatives of the council, and the council cannot direct or influence how members of the pensions authority take decisions relating to the administration or the management of the pension fund. Those members have a responsibility to follow the requirements set out in various pieces of legislation and must do what is in the best interest of the pension fund. But I hope that we can have that conversation with yourself and others, other members of the coalition, when we meet, ideally later on this week. Thank you.
Thank you. Now move on to next question from Val Johnson.
I too am very disappointed that my question has been disallowed, my first question. My other question is this. After the ruling of the International Court of Justice, it is now accepted that Israel is committing genocidal actions in Gaza and will be held to account for this in due course. Interim instructions issued by the ICJ to prevent genocidal actions by its army have been ignored by Israel. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, close to 8,000 people, including women and children, have been placed in administrative detention, which means that they're there without charge or trial, and hundreds have been shot dead. Invasions of refugee camps by the Israeli occupation forces and attacks by violent settlers are daily occurrences. There is a global outcry against these outrages, and this is reflected in Sheffield's community of citizens. Having responded with alacrity to the invasion of Ukraine, issuing a statement of unity and solidarity with the Ukrainian people, will the Council now issue a statement in which Sheffield stands in unity and solidarity with the Palestinians and endorses and supports the legal processes underway to hold Israel to account at the International Court of Justice? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you very much for your question. As I mentioned to Hilary just now, a report will be coming to the Strategy and Resources Committee later this month, which will provide an update regarding the Council's actions relating to the tragic ongoing conflict. That report is informed by the conversation that I and others have had with members of the coalition. The ICJ's interim ruling set out urgent provisional measures that must be followed. It's imperative that Israel must now comply with the orders of this ruling in full. And I join others in pressing for those orders to be implemented. Look, I've been clear throughout this entire conflict that justice and international law must be upheld, and as such I fully support the legal process underway at the ICJ. And I reiterate here, as I have done before, that the loss of civilian life in Gaza and the humanitarian catastrophe that we continue to see is utterly heartbreaking. The UK government should be doing all it can to secure a sustainable ceasefire and resume peace talks, and I hope that the slightly more promising news over the last 48 hours about the potential for a ceasefire, about the potential stop to the loss of innocent life and the release of hostages, I hope that that comes to fruition and we see those things come to pass in the coming days and weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Annie O'Gara.
Thank you. I too am disappointed that the question on Israeli apartheid was disallowed. My question, On January the 26th, the International Court of Justice ruled that South Africa's charge of genocide against Israel was sufficiently plausible for the case to be heard in full. In its interim ruling, the court instructed Israel, inter alia, to refrain from any acts that could fall under the Genocide Convention, to ensure its troops commit no genocidal acts in Gaza, and to take measures to improve the humanitarian situation for Palestinian civilians. None of this has happened. 174 Palestinian civilians were slaughtered in the 24 hours following the court's ruling. Shelters are still being bombed, hospitals are still besieged, aid convoys have faced protests by crowds of flag-waving Israeli citizens. 80 bodies, which had been stolen by Israel from a vandalized Gaza cemetery, were sent back from Israel in a lorry, now so badly decomposed that their identification and dignified reburial as human beings with names was impossible. The list goes on. All of us, including our youngsters, are seeing this live streamed on social media and faithfully reported on Al Jazeera. In relation to this, the Coalition is aware that some schools in Sheffield are failing their pupils on a number of important levels. The International Court of Justice ruling on genocide should be a curriculum element in all schools, given its importance and its rarity, because active citizenship means understanding the rule of law, both UK and international. Young people should be guided to reliable reference points for forming their own opinions, such as internationally respected human rights bodies like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. Youngsters need to talk and test their views, whatever those views, in a safe environment with teachers. Is this sensible pedagogy dominating? No. Many students, distressed by what they see on social media and asking what is being done about it, are further distressed by a silence on Palestine imposed by some schools, a silence which stands in sharp contrast to fulsome support and open discussion of Ukraine's invasion by Russia. Youngsters know double standards when they see them, and so do their parents. Questions. Does the Council recognise that legitimate discussion on Palestine is being suppressed in our city's schools? What mechanisms are there for concerns to be reported to the Council by parents, youngsters and teachers?
Thank you. Can I call upon Councillor Dawn Dale, Chair of the Education, Children and Families Policy Committee, to respond.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Mrs O'Gara, for your question. I will give a brief response now, but I would like to meet with you if that's okay, and then be able to send you a full written technical response with regards to the national curriculum. But I'd like to thank you for bringing your question and bringing to our attention the well-being of children and young people in our city. I'm grateful to you for raising this issue. Firstly, I want to say clearly that I share your concerns and the concerns of many in this city about the heartbreaking situation in Gaza. The news that is being reported from Gaza is devastating, and the humanitarian crisis is growing in severity. I fully agree with the leader's comments when he says that the urgent provisional measures set out in the ICJ's interim ruling must be followed. Israel must comply with the orders in full, and international law must be upheld. I also agree with you that what children are seeing on the news and on social media news feeds is traumatic and deeply distressing, and I feel strongly that children need safe spaces to discuss their concerns and fears so that they can contextualise and make sense of them, of what they are seeing. They should not be expected to navigate these feelings about the conflict on their own. So following the full Council vote on the Israel-Palestine conflict, we have been proactive in our options to support our young residents in the city, discussions have been had to develop and advocate different opportunities for young people to participate in. Working with partners, we have recognised that we need to respond to 3 emerging issues for young people and the youth sector. One is the ability for young people to be able to express their authentic self with creative youth voice options. We have been working closely with the voluntary, community and faith sector partners who are currently producing resources to work with young people to help understand the conflict in all contexts and enable young people to consider their own social and emotional responses to this. We have also been able to make a commitment to open dialogue with schools to look at supporting additional resources around the conflict that can open safe spaces up for young people in school to have a voice. This is in the very early stages, and we are awaiting resources from partners which will be fact-checked before we approach the schools. Finally, we also need a workforce that is safe, well and enabled to work with the experiences of young people that are related to this conflict. So we have partners that are willing to work with us to offer mental health first aid for practitioners. Regarding our schools, I would encourage young people and parents with concerns to raise them directly with the schools, their governing bodies and chief executives. However, I will ask officers to send a copy of my response to you to all schools in Sheffield so that my views on this matter are understood. I will also send you further written responses with additional information that has been provided to me by officers, including the guidance from the DFE, which is in relation to the curriculum. Again, I would be welcome if we could have a sit down and a conversation about your concerns. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. The next question is from Izzy Price.
Hi, good afternoon. The Tyndall report recommendations are for the whole city rather than just the council. If these had been followed by the council, we should have reduced emissions by between 40% and 50% by now. The council recently announced it has reduced its emissions by 3% since 2019. How will this reduction be increased in 2024?
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Ben Miskell to respond.
Thank you very much for your question and activism that you're showing towards the climate emergency and also the wonderful antennae that you're wearing on your head. The Tyndall report was an important document that laid the foundations of the work that we're currently undertaking to tackle the climate emergency, including our 10-point plan for climate action. This council is ambitious to meet its targets, but we need that ambition to be matched by support from central government. We have in place a government that has failed to provide the adequate funds to tackle the climate emergency in this city. It is, however, important to say that in that national context, Sheffield's progress is comparable to other core cities, and there has been notable success, including cross-party support for climate action the council has taken, from introducing climate impact assessments to the creation of a 10-point plan for climate action, to ensuring major schemes like Connecting Sheffield and the Clean Air Zone progress. Having said all of this, as a city and as a council, we need to go much further, but ultimately we need national government to support us, and we're being held back by the Tories in Westminster. It's also worth noting that our biggest challenge as a council is our own council house estate, which contributes nearly 90% of the organisation's greenhouse gas carbon emissions. We have reported a 27% reduction in emissions from our non-domestic estate and 32% reduction from our street lighting. But with housing being such a large proportion of our emission inventory, the reporting doesn't reflect the progress made in other areas. Councillor Johnson may wish to speak about the work that his committee is doing to address this issue. Thank you, of course, for your question, and I want to reassure you that we do remain absolutely committed to wanting to address the climate emergency and need government action to match that resolve. Thank you.
Perhaps you could
Thank
just
you,
get on
thank
with
you.
it then.
Moving on to the next question now, which is from Cy Davis. Thank you. Mr Davis, if you want to ask your question.
Thank you to all the representatives responsible for the people and the safety of people in this city now and for all future generations. Achieving a real net zero is going to be one of the most difficult things that you're going to do. And 3% of what was required just shows how difficult that is. How things stand, it's looking impossible. And we're wanting assurance that there is a viable strategy in place to move forwards quicker. 50% of all historical emissions have occurred within my lifetime. If growth at 3% a year, which is the rate which economies like to aim for, occurs, those emissions will be doubled again by 2050. They will be doubled again by 2075. That leaves an 8-fold increase in emissions, in the amount of energy required, in the amount of resources required, in the amount of pollution that is dumped upon the biosphere. So there can be no logical argument to counter the claim that infinite growth on a finite planet is impossible. Absolute decoupling, the prerequisite for net zero to be obtainable, needs to be seen in that context. And there's no evidence to suggest that it is obtainable, and certainly not within the time framework, and definitely not with respect to the available resources. So now seems the time for committed and responsible people to devote time and resources to the exploration of alternative models of economic development. To avoid this is to avoid preparation for future shocks. Now, that was the preamble to what is my question to you. So in this context, would the Council outline the scientific and economic assumptions with evidence to support those assumptions that are being made to suggest that there can be an absolute decoupling of the city's emissions from the city's gross domestic product? And further, could the Council clarify whether it considers that Council commitments to both citizens, particularly our most vulnerable citizens, and to the environment is possible without sustained levels of economic growth in the region that I suggested of 3%? And if the Council is unable to provide reliable evidence that net zero can be achieved with the planned economic growth, and given the political sensitivity of considering alternative economic models, would the Council consider investment of a relatively small amount of money to support an independent summit, to consider how a post-growth or degrowth or donut or steady-state economy, whatever language you want to use, could be developed in Sheffield along the lines of the 2023 European Union's Beyond Growth Conference? Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Ben Miskell to respond.
Thank you for your question. It is through clean economic growth that we create the shared wealth needed to tackle the climate emergency. And whilst you may respectfully disagree with me, it's important to say that I am pro-growth. Growing our economy locally means that we have more money in the municipal coffers to be able to fund projects to tackle poverty and injustice, and brings about more jobs to our city. We are, of course, living with the fallout of the reckless economic policies of Liz Truss, which has hurt people in this city economically and made the job that we have to tackle the climate emergency even more challenging. That's why we should welcome Labour's Green Prosperity Plan and a Labour government which will seek to sustain the highest growth in the G7. They may not like
Just
it,
a moment,
but we will have a general
people,
election coming
members.
along.
Ben, just be cognizant of what was said before.
Of course, Lord Mayor. And I think it's important to say that this is a plan that I support and a plan that will deliver for the people of Sheffield. And whilst we appreciate that you coming here today, it's important to say that we would not consider hosting or supporting a conference that was anti-growth. Sheffield, of course, is a city on the up, and that involves punching in line with and above our weight. A city that is unashamedly pro-growth, pro-jobs, pro-lifting people out of poverty, attracting the sustainable industries of the future and tackling the climate emergency.
Lord Mayor. Thank you. Moving on to the next question now, which is from Graham Rowe.
Lord Mayor, could I just read the short part of the Constitution? Committee chairs will answer on behalf of the committee and not in a personal capacity. Could we try and abide by this, please?
Thank you for that bit of information, and I'm assuming all committee chairs have taken note of that and will abide by it in any future responses. Thank you. Graham Rowe.
Lord Mayor and Councillors, we are in a climate emergency. Will you please begin to understand that? Last year was the hottest year on record. This year is going to be hotter still, and climate scientists tell us that it's going to breach 1.5 degrees C this year. No one was thinking that 5 years ago when you declared a climate emergency. They thought we had stacks of time. We haven't. Time has run out. We told you 5 years ago time is running out. Time now has run out. And you're still not acting like it's an emergency. In 2019, when the Council declared a climate emergency, Extinction Rebellion asked you to prioritise climate information and action in Council communications. For instance, we wanted climate action to be clearly visible to any casual visitor of the Council website. And we wanted the Council leader to use the annual Council tax letter as an opportunity to educate the public about the dangers the planetary crises such as the climate and nature emergencies present us with, and what the Council is doing to mitigate them. There is still, 5 years later, no link from the front page of the website to information about climate change. And the Council tax letter usually contains half a sentence referring to climate change. There is a wealth of information on the Council website, but it's not in a format that anyone, apart from climate nerds like me, are likely to read. The page about net zero still links prominently to COP26 events, so obviously hasn't been updated for 2 years. This is not acting as if there is an emergency. When will the Council start to do this? And I must tell you, I've already had a written answer to this question, which is basically no. But I really don't see any reason why the Council can't use their website and their communications to council taxpayers to communicate the urgency of this climate and nature emergency. Thank you.
Councillor Miskell.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe, for your question. I'll try to address each of the points that you kindly did submit in advance. So firstly, our web pages are updated regularly. The most recent update was February 2024, and updates before that in January 2024 and in December 2023. And further updates are imminent, and to include our bi-monthly environment newsletter, which is sent out to over 5,000 recipients. We do, of course, encourage anyone who's interested to sign up and receive that newsletter, and to encourage other people to do so. Climate change is also frequently included in our annual council tax letter. Number two, with regards to your questions about dealing with extreme weather events, Like other emergency situations...
I've not asked that question yet. I was just asking...
Well, thank you very much, Mr Rowe. You do
Can
supply
I ask a
in
second
advance
question?
to me,
Okay,
and I'm able
Ben,
to prepare.
Ben, will you just sit down? Will you ask the second part of your question? I noticed that you stopped after the first one. You've got your second question, and Ben then can give his response. Can I also say we are running right up against the clock in this, and I'm really keen that everybody gets to answer the question. So stick to the words submitted.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Lord Mayor. Sheffield's resilience to extreme weather needs to improve as global heating continues and extreme weather events become more frequent and more extreme. What preparations have been made for the next extreme heat wave? Are the council aware of which council houses and care homes are particularly vulnerable to overheating in a heat wave? What provision will there be for people in such accommodation the next time thermometers reach 40 degrees C? Rotherham has a heatwave action plan. Is Sheffield developing one? Section 1 of the Upper Don Valley Alleviation Scheme is now complete, which is good news. But with sea levels rising and the likelihood of many heavy storms increasing, we need to continue to improve flood defences, both natural and engineered. Which parts of the city are now most vulnerable to flooding? What progress has been made in natural methods of flood alleviation to stop water running off the moors so quickly? When will beavers be reintroduced to the city? What flood prevention measures will be progressed in 2024? And finally, which is very important, seeing the news from Chile today, the incidence of wildfires is also increasing. The fire brigade need more resources to cope with this, as well as the floods and storms they have to deal with. Will the council lobby the government for an increase in the revenue support grant to help the fire brigade keep us all safe? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ben, if you answer the second question then.
Thank you, Mr Rowe, and also for the 70 questions that you submitted to our sustainability team, which we have worked through and I understand supplied you with answers to the vast majority of them. With regards to the question about dealing with extreme weather events, like other emergency situations, these are led by the Emergency Planning Shared Service, which is a joint service between Rotherham and Sheffield. There is an extreme weather plan which the team put together based upon the national plans and guidance. Service areas also have operational plans on how to respond if there is a heat wave. With regards to flooding, there's a lot of work that's going on, and the Sheffield's Flood Protection Programme prioritised investment in areas of the greatest risk, which is why we addressed the Lower Don Valley first, and the scheme there was completed in 2017. I'll write to you with more detail as the list of plans and actions is too numerous for us to go into today. With regards to wildfires, all services will be required to develop a service-based climate adaptation risk assessment and action plan during 2024, and it's expected that this will consider the risk posed by wildfires along with other climate risks such as increased floods and heat wave events. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you. Ruth Owen's next question.
Good afternoon, everyone. Meat and dairy production in the UK accounts for 50% of our methane emissions. And scientists say we must cut methane by 45% this decade. A recent analysis of UK diets showed that plant-based diets result in 75% less greenhouse emissions, water pollution and land use than diets with more than 100 grams of meat per day. They also cut wildlife destruction by 66% and water use by 54%. UK diets and production are currently unsustainable. And here's a kicker. If everyone had the same production to consumption ratio as the UK, we would need another planet the size of Mercury to feed the world. Here's a question. Please could Sheffield Council follow the lead of 25 towns and cities worldwide, including Edinburgh, Norwich, Exmouth, Haywards Heath and Lambeth, by endorsing the Plant-Based Treaty and developing a plant-based food strategy to help to normalise and expand access to plant-based foods. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's Councillor Miskell again.
Thank you very much for your question today, and also for the dialogue that I think we have had over previous months on this particular issue. The fairer, healthier and greener food strategy for Sheffield focuses on the Council's key priorities around addressing the climate emergency, better health and reducing inequalities. Amongst others, we are committed to use our influence to create environments where healthier, more sustainable food choices are possible, easy and, importantly, affordable. Where wildlife destruction, of course, is an issue, but we also know that actually it is very important that we have food that is culturally appropriate and abundant, and to safeguard our food system by ensuring that it produces nutritious food, restores nature and reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and is resilient to the effects of climate change and other global shocks. The strategy outlines a number of priority actions we intend to take in order to meet those commitments. In relation to carbon emissions, these can be found, and I'm happy to supply this document to you, on pages 18 and 19 of this particular document. Now, a public consultation will occur, which will aim to gather and to understand the public's views on the area of priority for the Council in relation to food, and that's about access, security, sustainability, and of course the policy. One subject that will be examined is in the consultation is reducing meat consumption and increasing the availability of plant-based food provisions. Now, I realise that this is a contentious subject, which is why we must gather and understand the public's views as well as inform. So I do thank you for coming here today to ask your question.
Thank you. We have reached the 60-minute... Let me finish what I'm going to say. We have reached the 60-minute time limit for the public questions. However, I've got 3 more questions, and with Council's agreement, I wish to allow those questions to take place. Is that agreed? So, as I say, wait till I've finished before you jump in. Zach Vinnick's next question.
Thank you, Council, for extending the time limit today. I'll be as brief as possible. As raised within the meeting today, Sheffield City Council is trailing behind on its decarbonisation goals following the declaration of a climate emergency in 2019. Whilst I appreciate and empathise that the Council will have not received sufficient support from the national government, I believe that with the stakes so high, with the consequences for future generations globally so severe, that these failures are ones that we shouldn't be willing to accept. So I come to this meeting today to not merely complain, but propose a policy change to address this target whilst also increasing health and well-being, reducing light pollution and making our public realm a more attractive place to be. My suggestion is Sheffield City Council introduces an immediate ban and removal of digital billboard advertising. Now, you might think this sounds novel, or nice to have, but hear me out. Picture one 6-sheet advertising board, usually placed on the side or in the middle of a pavement, impeding pedestrians, the disabled, and distracting motorists. Just one of these boards consumes as much energy as 3 family homes, with larger units consuming as much electricity as 11 family homes. Not only is this exceedingly wasteful, but this advertising is often concentrated in areas of socio-economic depravity, advertising things that people living there may not be able to afford, or products which are damaging for public health, such as SUVs, junk food, gambling, or alcoholic products. Councillor Miskell has recently been sent details of the impact of outdoor advertising in Sheffield by a campaign, Ad-Free Cities, and invited to Westminster to hear the details of the full implications of this issue. Could Sheffield follow in the wake of cities such as Bristol, Grenoble, Lyon or Amsterdam and introduce strict regulations on outdoor advertising, a win for people's well-being, the public morale and the council's sustainability goals?
Thank you. Councillor Miskell.
Thank you for your question and engagement with us here on this issue. I'm pleased to say that the Finance Committee is due to consider a new advertising and sponsorship policy at its meeting on the 18th of March of this year. And this policy will draw on best practice from around the country and ensure that we have an ethical approach to advertising of products and services. The large and small format digital sites that are in place around the city all have planning consent in place. And as part of this, were assessed around the impact on the visual amenity and highway safety. In terms of their energy use, both the providers of these billboards have sustainability plans in place, including using 100% renewable energy and switching off sites between midnight and 5 AM to reduce energy use. We have, however, very limited control over other operators of advertising sites, which are usually much larger installations. Only a minority of large format sites in the city are part of the City Council's contractual relations and arrangements with providers, and in relation to small format sites, barring compliance and highway regulations and limited planning obligations, telecom providers are free to erect advertising screens that include telecommunications elements, such as an ability to make phone calls or access the internet wherever they wish, and we see those in our town, in our city centre. Thank you very much for your question, and no doubt you'll continue to make the case, and I'd advise you to attend the Finance Committee on the 18th of March, where this issue will be discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. Clara Chung for the next question.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Clara Chung, Sheffield, Hong Konger. So thanks for the opportunity for me to raise the question here. So recently, in January and February of 2024, the UN Human Rights Council's Universal Periodic Review about the human rights issue in China, the People's Republic of China. In that review, there was actually a significant rise in the number of UN member states submitting questions, from 9 in 2009 to 36 in 2024, indicating an increased global scrutiny of the human rights record in the People's Republic of China, especially concerning international legal obligations. And the UK representative at the UN particularly urged China to stop the persecution and arbitrary detention of the Uyghurs and the Tibetans. He also asked China to repeal the national security law in Hong Kong as recommended by the UN and stop prosecutions, including the Hong Kong media owner, Jimmy Lai, who is also a British citizen. And we also know that the new partner city policy approved by the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee of Sheffield City Council last year in November. It says that it is without doubt that international partnerships can sometimes bring benefits to the council and the residents of the city, but only if they fit within the council's priorities and are vibrant and active. And the policy also says it needs to, the council needs to have sufficient flexibility to enable relationship to be reviewed and potentially withdrawn if the arrangement no longer fits the council's priorities or even has the potential to cause reputational damage. And it is quite obvious that the Sheffield City Council would have reputational damage if it keeps endorsing the regime that would seriously violate human rights, which is clearly indicated in the UN and acknowledged by our UK representatives. So my question is, when will Sheffield City Council terminate its twinning relationship and trade agreement with the cities ruled by the People's Republic of China regime? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you very much for your question today. The next meeting of the Strategy and Resources Committee on 21st of February will consider a report that sets out the current status of all twinning, friendship and other agreements and relationships that the City of Sheffield has with places around the world, including those in China. In line with the recently approved partner city policy that you quoted from, this will include considering which relationships should be brought to an end, which should be maintained, and which could be deepened. The representations that you have made today and over other months will be taken into consideration in advance of the report being prepared for that committee. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final question from Julie Pern.
Thank you. I'm also disappointed that Val's question about apartheid was disallowed in this council. In the 1980s, Sheffield declared itself an apartheid-free zone, and the City Council banked with the cooperative, an ethical choice. Barclays Bank was a pariah institution, shunned by a generation because of its huge investments in the apartheid South African economy and its military. In 2014, the council switched all its banking to Barclays. In 2018, the council adopted its ethical procurement policy. This included tests against contracting with companies guilty of gross misconduct, specifically breach of international human rights. In March 2022, environmental activists urged the council not to renew its contract with Barclays as the biggest European investor in fossil fuels. Nevertheless, the council went ahead and renewed its contract with Barclays in September 2022. Once again, Barclays Bank is outstanding as a supporter of apartheid, now in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. The bank holds over £1 billion in shares in and provides over £3 billion in loans and underwriting to 9 companies whose weapons, components and military technology are being used by Israel in its attacks on Palestinians. This includes General Dynamics, which produces the gun systems that arm the fighter jets used by Israel to bombard Gaza, and Elbit Systems, which produces armoured drones, munitions, and artillery weapons being used now by the Israeli military in both Gaza and the West Bank. The historic ruling at the International Court of Justice at The Hague on 26th of January 2024 means Israel is on trial for genocide, and third-party states are liable if they are complicit in or do not act to prevent genocide. Specifically, the Genocide Convention has been incorporated into UK law by the International Criminal Court Act of 2001. Barclays, by providing investment and financial services to these arms companies, is liable for supporting acts of genocide. And the City Council, by banking with Barclays, is supporting a complicit company. My question, which I wanted to ask the Chief Executive, but I was told I wasn't allowed, is, can you give a verbal report now of the due diligence carried out according to the tests and measures against gross misconduct in the Council's ethical procurement policy before the decision was made to renew the Council's banking contract with Barclays in 2022? And will the Council undertake to review its contractual commitment to Barclays, look at alternative banking options, and in the meantime, arrange a meeting with Barclays to explain it will be necessary to change in the light of legal and moral obligations? Thank you.
Thank you. This section is members' questions, so quite rightly, questions are only directed to members of the council and not officers. So Councillor Hunt is going to respond.
Thank you very much for your questions. As I've mentioned, a report is going to be considered by the Strategy and Resources Committee on February the 21st about the Council's actions with respect to the ongoing conflict in Gaza. The report will include discussion of the Council's existing contractual relationships, and it will ask the committee to note that Sheffield City Council does not have any relationships with companies that have been identified by the UN Human Rights Council as supporting or enabling illegal settlements in the occupied territories. In relation to Barclays, the Council's contract was procured in line with the ethical procurement policy. This allows us to ask for and take into consideration how the contract will generate social value within the city and more broadly. However, it does not allow us to take into account non-commercial matters that are prohibited by the Local Government Act 1988. And they would include a set of issues that you have raised today. Nonetheless, we are currently conducting a review of our ethical procurement policy as part of developing a wider commercial strategy for the organisation. I will ensure that the concerns raised by you today and by campaigners in this meeting and others will be considered and taken into account as part of that review. And I can say that when our banking contract comes up for renewal, we will procure it in line with the law and with the ethical procurement policy, which, as I say, is currently being reviewed. Thank you.
Thank you. I've two further questions of people who are not present today from Michael Mullin and Sam Wakeling, and they'll be incorporated with the responses into the minutes of this meeting. We now move on to item number 6, which is members' questions. Oh, please, will you remove that banner? It is over the camera. Will you remove that banner, or I'll remove that banner? It is obscuring the camera. Can we stop the transmission, please?
The question was actually in 2 parts, so I have 2 comments. First of all, I was really surprised when I received a reply to my comments and letters sent to the South Yorkshire Combined Authority last October. And lots of my colleagues, once my question went in, also got their letters from October, November and December, all answered last week. Bit of a coincidence, really. And also, the reply, whilst a bit of a preamble, didn't take into account the fact that people from Wasborough don't have a bus link to Halfway Park and Ride and the Supertram. So mentioning that they could actually go there and then catch a bus to the cemetery, bit useless, really. And also, my second comment, I've still not been told how the monitoring of missing buses is done. Do I keep sending messages that seem to go into the ether, no comment, no acknowledgement, or are the bus companies monitoring themselves? Thank you.
Councillor Hunt.
I'll make sure that Simca contacts you to provide information about how those services are monitored.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Horner's got 3 questions. Do you have any supplementaries?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I do. To try and move things along, first of all, the answer to my second question was a factual question with a factual answer, and I thank Councillor Hunt for that, so I don't have a supplementary on that point. The first question is a little difficult because Councillor Hunt's given a very detailed answer, which raises a number of factors. Something I wish to point out, Councillor Hunt's answer to me appears to be somewhat different to what Councillor Miskell said in his party political broadcast earlier, because in relation to bus franchising, Councillor Hunt says we're undergoing an assessment. We can't prejudge the outcome. Sorry, Councillor Miskell said we're going to do it. Labour's amendment to the climate change motion talks about public control, but you said you can't prejudge it. One of you's given the Keir Starmer answer clearly, and the other one is indulging in electioneering. The question that you raised about the 80 bus service, Conservative Derbyshire has funded the 80 bus service to Crystal Peaks. I accept the point that it competes in other parts with other services, but it doesn't through Southall, as you in fact admitted in your answer. The operator has said the reason why it won't go round through Southall is because it would require an extra vehicle a day to do that. So why didn't Labour South Yorkshire talk to Conservative Derbyshire? I mean, you must be embarrassed that a Conservative authority is funding a bus service and you're not. Why didn't you talk to them about the possibility of funding that bus service for the bit of the route that isn't in competition with anybody else? Why wasn't that done, Councillor?
Thank you, Councillor Horner. Councillor Miskell and I have said exactly the same thing, the very same words about not prejudging it, so there's no difference of opinion there. On the point about number 80, look, I think it's really clear that I am today providing information to you from South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority. The detailed specifics of what you're referring to will require a further response from South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority, and I'm happy to commit to get that and provide you with information.
Thank you. I take it you've got supplementary on question 3?
Yes. Thank you, Lord Mayor. The question about the tram system, you're now saying, Councillor Hunt, that they're in discussions with the Department for Transport, that, you know, an ongoing development of a business case. Now, the question I asked you at the last meeting was, when you said we're going to have a tram train running via Bayton, my colleague then asked some detailed questions of the Mayor, like what would the timetable be? The Mayor said, we haven't got to that point yet. Whether there'd be a park and ride in Bayton, we haven't got to that point yet. So that raises two questions. First of all, the timetable question is important in two respects. One, because, as I keep pointing out, Bayton is on a passenger railway line. It signals a passenger railway line because it's a diversion line. If the timetable is not going to be better than half hourly, then it's better that it is restored as a railway line than as a tram, because the advantage of the tram is its frequency. Every other advantage is with the railway system. But the final point is, you said, in answer to my question, that it was a fully costed plan. It cannot be fully costed if you cannot tell us what the timetable would be, because that determines how many units you need to buy. You cannot tell us all those other details, like is there going to be a park and ride somewhere? It's not a fully costed plan. I asked you if it was a fully costed plan, or was it the back of the fag packet? I suggest you reconsider, with respect to that, I suggest you reconsider your answer to me, or perhaps examine the back of the fag packet.
I mean, I think there was a question in there. We've got half an hour for member questions, and I think there's quite a few people who want to get through. So, you know, I think let's cut to the chase. I have set out my aspiration for an expanded tram network. 35 years ago, foresighted politicians in this council took a decision that we needed a mass transit system for our city. That was the right and brave thing to do, and it's now time, 30 years on from when the tram started running, that we think hard about expanding our tram network. Running tram train services down the line that you're talking about is exactly the kind of thing that we ought to be doing. A tram vision work exercise is being done by Sheffield City Council jointly with the Mayoral Combined Authority, and conversations are being had with the Department for Transport to talk about our level of aspiration. So it's time that we start actually thinking very, very hard about how and where we can run additional tram services, and it would be great to come out and have a conversation with you in Bayton about the advantages that bringing the tram out there would be for all of our city and for the residents of Bayton.
Thank you. Last question to Councillor Holmeshaw. Have you got any supplementaries? Be succinct, please.
Yes, I'll keep it very brief. Thank you for the reply, Tom. This is a question on a local nature recovery strategy. Very comprehensive reply. But I'm really keen that all ward councillors are involved. It's the main thrust of my question. So can officers offer a knowledge briefing on this to all councillors and actually be proactive about involving those councillors?
Thank you. We're not happy to take that forward.
That's what I like, succinct questions and answers. Right, we now move on to the other members' questions. I don't have any questions notified of the pensions or the fire authority. No. So, members' questions, and as usual, I'll go through it page by page. So, page 1 on the questions set out. Marion? Yeah.
Thank you. Two quick ones. The answer to question 4 indicates that the two advertising companies that the council lease space to apparently use 100% renewable energy. So my question is this written into the contract and is it evidenced?
I don't know, but I can find out that information and get back to you.
Thank you. And question 5, thank you for confirming that the advertising panels in the bus lanes have got planning permission. Is it time to review planning consents for advertising panels in the middle of cycle lanes? Question.
Yes, go ahead.
That's a matter for the planning committee to consider on an application by application basis. I suspect that what you're talking about would require change at a national level, but I would defer to experts in the planning department on that, but happy to ask them that question on your behalf and write to you with further information.
Thank you. Page 2, page 3, page 4. Oh. Councillor Levery.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Question 2. I asked how many empty properties by taxman were there in 2018 prior to the introduction of the current policy. I'm astonished that this council didn't know how many empty properties there were in this city in 2018. So I'm getting a written answer, which I presume will not give me the number, but you say it will be provided shortly. Will it be provided before the Finance Committee? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Next. We go on question 3 now.
Question 3, yeah. I asked about how many empty properties by tax band were there in 2023. That was answered in the first 2 paragraphs. Why was there a need to add another 2 paragraphs, one of which was the chair of the Finance Committee being clear in supporting implementing these changes? I, as Vice Chair, am not aware of the Chair's views on this. I'm sure a number of committee members are not aware of the Chair's views on this. What has that got to do with this question? Thank you.
It's a factual bit of information that I've provided, just as added context for the conversation in advance of the Finance Committee discussion on the 19th.
I'm on page 5 now.
Finally, question 4. There are 7,000 empty properties in this city. That is an absolute disgrace. The previous policy to this, and the new policy that's been introduced in 2019, was supposed to reduce empty properties in this city. How has a regressive policy like this led to such a large number of empty properties? Thank you.
Well, what I can say is that on later this month at the Finance Committee, it will be considering a policy which will be reducing the long-term empty premium to 12 months in order to put further pressure on landlords and property owners to get them back into use. And I think it's important that we use the new powers that have just come from government legislation, as the Vice Chair of the committee will be aware, to great effect, and hopefully we'll see a reduction in that number.
Page 5, Alexi.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for your answer, Tom. Given that we know that there remains more to be done in terms of improvements to the contact centre improvement plan, what implications does that have on the budget?
I'm not sure what you're specifically referring to there, so perhaps you and I could have a further conversation about that outside of this meeting. Thank you.
Page 6. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Tom, for your non-answer. Would you now like to indicate whether or not you believe that genocide is taking place in Gaza? A simple yes or no will suffice, please.
Thank you. I've made it clear in the last conversation when you and I will remember we had a long back and forth about this, but it's not a simple, straightforward yes or no matter. That is why the ICJ is taking proper process to consider whether it is a genocidal case that's been presented or not. The interim ruling has been made. There will now be further consideration. I said before, and I'll say it again, that is why international expert lawyers are looking at this, and that is exactly the right process. I wish I had the moral and legal certainty to be able to provide you with an answer on that, but I'm not an international lawyer, and it's right that the court is allowed to understand the case, progress proceedings, and come to a ruling.
Page 7. Page 8.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson, for your answers on the issues we've got with damp and black mould. With regard to question 1, it is good to see that we're taking action. However, on the ground, and I'm sure as a ward councillor, you probably get similar issues. A lot of these remedies that you're probably mentioning here are little more than sticking plasters, where they paint over mould or paint over damp patches. Would it be possible for you to investigate through your committee as to the nature of the repairs that are being done? Are they just sticking plasters, as I alluded to, or are they actually more strategic structural interventions to prevent the damp and mould recurring?
Councillor John.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, just dropping my papers there. Yeah, that's pretty well the work that the committee has been doing over the last year when it comes to disrepair, damp and mould. Damp and mould's been a priority, as it should be. And as you recall, I mean, for years and years, the council used to just send someone out who would paint over a damp wall and then that would be it. And that's very much not what happens now. It certainly shouldn't be happening. So there might be an immediate mould treatment, but the point is to get to the structural reason for why mould is there and why the damp is there, and investigate that and get to the source of it. So that's very much the drive of what the repair service is doing now. So it's a really welcome change of house in previous practices.
Thank you. Question
2.
Question 2.
The answer you've given here is really helpful. What it would be helpful to understand is, do you know what the median and mean waiting periods are for decantment for residents who are suffering from extreme issues with black mould?
I think you might have to ask one of the officers for stats, but I'm actually not sure that those stats will come out with anything meaningful. You've got to remember that decanting people from properties isn't a very convenient thing. It's not what people want to do most of the time, and it's not, your simple solution to it. So it's only going to work in particular circumstances, works out with the family who's living there.
You've got one on question 3.
Finally, thank you again for the answers, Doug. I appreciate that it is reassuring to see that the actual presence of black mould is taken seriously and we don't necessarily discriminate by the amount or otherwise. My main concern here is that we don't seem to be gathering evidence as to the nature of the black mould within our stocks. For instance, I've got a constituent whose daughters are anxious about going to school because their clothes stink of mould. and that's having profound psychological impacts on them. So, though I'm supportive of the fact that we don't discriminate as to the nature and the intensity of that mould, it doesn't feel like we've got sufficient evidence on that. Will your committee be able to investigate the nature and level of the mould within properties and actually get a feeling? Because obviously there'll be some properties with small amounts of mould and others with really significant issues. And if we're not differentiating between those two cases, it doesn't necessarily feel like our approach is proportionate. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting discussion from the biological point of view about what sort of mould it is. How the spores transmit. The sort of fungal, the sort of structure of the organism and everything. It's not something that anyone's raised in our committee. And to be honest, I probably wouldn't encourage people to start going down that line. I mean, frankly, from my point of view, if there's black mould there, appreciate you get different sorts of mould, but I don't care. It just needs cleaning up.
Okay, we're on page 9.
Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Johnson, for your answer. Just a two-part follow-up. One, so I asked in the question how many landlords have the council taken action against. I think from the answer it looks like I've been given the number of cold cases rather than landlords, or would I be able to get the other information as well? And then two, on that question as well, it looks like there's a decrease in real terms of the number of landlords that, the number of cold cases that have been acted upon by the housing service since the pandemic. That worries me a little because, intuition would suggest with the cost of living crisis, rising cost of energy, more houses would have issues with cold. I wonder how confident you are about people's awareness of this power the council has, the ability to take action against landlords in cold properties, and are we doing enough to communicate about it to our residents?
Thanks. I think the figures here are some statistics given by officers. And when it comes to further examination of them, I mean, it might be worth making inquiries directly with officers rather than me giving a political answer. But I think what's news, these figures are clearly taken off a system, and you'll notice it specifically refers to them being closed cases. In reality, when officers are working on a case, there's some time, sometimes quite a considerable time, from when they get a first report from a tenant on to the point where they've made extensive contact with the landlord, and then they've been able to satisfy themselves that repairs have been done. So if these relate to the dates of closure of what might be a long period of enforcement, it's why the figures might bump up and down. So you have to take into account it's going to be a bit arbitrary as to exactly which calendar year they're closed in, and that might explain it. It doesn't tell us about the number of opened cases, so the number of new reports that are coming through. But again, I'm sure that the office will be able to provide any more stats if you want a bit more of a breakdown. Thanks.
Page 9, page 10. Sophie.
Thank you. Hello, right behind you. Just for question 1, please. As I'm pleased to see that work on these properties on Haslam Crescent has been brought forward. But this isn't exclusive to just these flats. There's others of this property type, not just in Low Edges, but across the city. So what work is going to happen to other properties of the same type, or are we going to leave them until their roofs blow off as well?
Yeah, it's fair to say it's not the intended policy of the council to blow roofs off houses. Just want to make that clear. I think on this one, what my understanding is that these properties are generally confined to this area, but it's triggered a whole series of investigations, and this is a really important thing, it's triggered investigations to find out what other house types might be affected by this. I think it depends on the particular nature of the work, so it's not just the house archetype, but the particular nature of the work that was done in that area at the time when those roofs were fitted. Weird kind of situation where it seems that there was a complete new roof fitted on top of the old roof. So actually these were houses with 2 roofs, of which one blew off, but the other one stayed on.
We're on page 11, page 12, page 13. Councillor Downs.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
There was some very sad news not very long ago when Winnie Smith from Thornton sadly passed away. The reason I'm asking this question is that I'd like to think that we could remember Winnie. I mean, we all remember her for her robust contributions from the gallery and her power of persuasion, not least that she gets me up to Thornton Tara Christmas social as Santa Claus. I'm not taking any more bookings, that's before you ask. But we've done this before with Terry Wright, quite rightly, at Gleedless, and I would like to think that we can remember Winnie in the same way. She certainly deserves it. And the question I'd like to ask is, have we decided what the process will be and what the timetable is? I'm pleased that it won't be this council, really, that makes the final decision. It'll be the people on Thornton. And I think if somebody could just enlighten me of how we're going to do it and when we're going to do it. If you don't know straight away, because you've been under pressure, Douglas, I've got some sympathy. If you could just let me know, and then and we can also thank you. And Derek, Winnie's husband, sat in the gallery at the moment. And unfortunately, now, sad news when you're going, but now at least Derek can get a word in edgeways at times. Can't you, Derek? Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Okay. Douglas?
Thanks. I'm glad to hear you're not taking any more bookings, Tony. I think on this, I mean, the point I made here is that, you know, it's not for us to be talking about renaming a community centre in honour of someone who's been a long-term wind-up merchant for you in particular, but it is for the local community, and I think, yeah, we'll have to ask. I'll take it back if I'll ask officers in the housing service to talk to people in the local area, talk to the local Tara there, see what their thoughts are. Maybe they don't like her as much as you do. Maybe they like her even more. I don't know, but I'm not them.
Okay, thank you. We're at page 14. Page 15. Curtis, that was page 14. Are you indicating? No. Barbara.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for the answer. It's good news that we're going to get some sort of shelter on Arundel Gate, but it concerns me. You're talking here about relocating the stops. I'm a bus user, and I'm fed up of being changes being made without any reference to bus users. So is there any intention of sharing the proposed move of these stops with bus users, because there's always going to be issues? And you mentioned that there's going to be digital displays. Well, unfortunately, a digital display on its own is meaningless because it does not tell you which buses should necessarily run at the time intervals. It just tells you in a short window what buses are expected at a stop. We need better information if we are to encourage bus users to use it, the bus service that we currently have, which isn't very poor. So have you any plans of actually sharing the proposed locations and the way you're going to present information with bus users at any stage? Thank you.
Ben.
Thank you, Councillor Masters, as well for your keen interest in all things bus. We know, don't we, that the bus shelter will be installed in late spring, and we welcome that. You know, we'll continue to work quite closely with SYMCA, and I'd be happy to supply a further written answer on the point that she raised.
I personally look forward to that bus shelter being installed, as it's where I get the bus. Yeah. Curtis, yeah.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. First of all, through you, Lord Mayor, I'd like to... there is an inaccuracy in answer 1, because the local plan in September was only endorsed by Labour and Green Party councillors. So... No, and not all Labour councillors either. So, on to the question, are you happy that the consultation and the Equalities Impact Assessment was inclusive, and are you proud to put your name to it?
Thank you, Councillor Crossland. Of course, these are matters which will no doubt be covered by the planning inspector as part of that ongoing process with the local plan. It is, of course, important, he's alluded to it, hasn't he? Important to say that local plan went through with Liberal Democrat votes, and I'd welcome that support in helping us to deliver that ambitious vision for the city here in Sheffield.
Okay, that's reached the 30-minute time limit for this item on the agenda. So we now move to item 7 on the agenda, which is the Housing Revenue Account Business Plan and Budget 2024-25. There's a maximum time limit of 25 minutes for this item. This item of business is to approve a Housing Revenue Account Business Plan and Budget for 2024. At its meeting held on the 24th of January this year, the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee approved a series of recommendations for consideration by Council today. These recommendations are set out in the report of the Executive Director of Neighbourhood Services, which was published with the agenda for this meeting. A motion to approve these recommendations was circulated to all members yesterday and has been published on the Council website this morning. Copies of the motion are available in the venue. There are no proposed amendments. May I call upon Councillor Douglas Johnson to move the motion, and you have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm going to propose this motion and the Leader of the Council is going to second it. I just want to say that I'm very pleased and proud to present this Housing Revenue Account, Business Plan and the Budget. This item is here because it's on behalf of all the tenants of Sheffield City Council, and it concerns what they pay, what our tenants pay. They pay for it all, we manage it on their behalf. So as a council, the landlord, we provide services of tenancy management, repairs, estate management, estate maintenance. We have a lot of maintenance. We have the major repairs, such as roof replacements and insulation schemes. We also build new homes. We'd always like to build more homes, but we do build new homes. And we supply a panoply of other services to a huge number of our tenants. And you've got to remember that many of our tenants are highly disadvantaged. And we, as a council, should be proud of providing this public service. We provide it to over 38,000 households. It makes us the largest landlord in the city. You've got to remember that, unlike Sheffield, many local authorities sold off their housing stock, and Sheffield didn't. Admittedly, it did dabble with outsourcing when it could, especially with its repairs service. It's finally brought that back in-house, and that's settled down now. But they are Sheffield's directly owned houses, and of course Sheffield is actually part of the Association of Retained Council Housing, and it's a proud member of that. Housing should be seen as a basic human right, and I think it's one that we should be proud to deliver. That's what this Housing Revenue Account is all about. It's for our tenants. So I also want to thank all our hundreds of staff who we employ to make this mammoth undertaking just happen day in, day out, all year round, and literally all year, because there are people from the housing service working out on Christmas Day, in the middle of the night, in storms, dealing with emergency situations like floods and roofs coming off. And I know that our staff don't always get the respect that they deserve for doing that job, and our tenants don't always get the respect that they deserve for being part of this public service. But, our workers are out there, they're doing their best to look after people's homes, and that's important. And I know, as we all know, that we don't always get this right. An organisation of this scale, there's always going to be some errors, but I think it's still worth noting that cases of disrepair in council housing still make it into the newspapers. You might have seen a few, but the point is they're still newsworthy, and council homes are a good deal compared to the many people who have to live in private rented housing.
Can you wrap up now?
I will wrap up. Just one final point to support this. 82% of our council homes have energy performance certificates in bands A, B and C. 82%. So more than 4/5 of homes are reasonably warm. I know it's not net zero, but it's there. Contrast, the private rented sector, which many people in the city have to live in, that shocking equivalent is only 23%. People are better off in council housing. So I'm going to commend this housing revenue account budget to you. Thank you.
Tom, to second the motion, you've got 2 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, good quality, affordable homes are essential for everybody, and in this city, we need more of them. They are the bedrock for good health, the stable conditions that are required for people to have successful work and education prospects. It is fundamental. The business case that we're considering today sets out a careful approach to investment in our housing stock. Let's be clear, though, that the HRA business account is under severe pressure because of economic headwinds that are not of this council's making. The fact that since Liz Truss crashed the economy last October, the interest rates and the cost of borrowing has soared has had a direct impact on what we're able to do with the HRA business account. Nonetheless, this is a plan that we can put forward to improve the quality of tenants' homes. But I'll also be clear, we need to be doing better. We need to be seeing improvement in the performance of our repairs service. We need to be turning around voids quicker. And we need to manage our estates better. I won't shy away from that. We do need, over the next months and years ahead, to see significant improvement. I would like to pay tribute to tenants and residents associations, TARAs do fantastic work to raise the voice of tenants in this city. I'd also just say, though, that when it comes to the HRA business case, it isn't the extent of our ambitions on housing. This morning at City Hall, Homes England, the government's housing and regeneration agency, were here along with 300 housing professionals. And in Sheffield, we've seen significant progress being made with Homes England to improve the quality, to improve the quantity of new homes in this city and new affordable homes. And I think we'll see some announcements coming forward around that. They recognise that this city is keen to work with them and to use all options we can to improve the quality of people's homes.
Right, thank you. And I now move to the debate on the matter because there are no amendments, and the first speaker I've got is Penny Baker.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think I'd also like to start by thanking the many housing staff that we have in this city who go above and beyond to make sure that our tenants are cared for in the best they can. When we had the housing flood in Stannington, they were out there day in, day out, for days on end, making sure that the tenants that were impacted were given the help and support they needed. We've thanked them before, I'd like to thank them again. They're continuing to go above and beyond. I think it's very important, that has been mentioned already, that we thank the tenants for the jobs they do, for their tenants and residents associations, for their knit and natters, for their Christmas lunches that Stannington Tara do every year for those who otherwise would be alone. They do an amazing job in thinking out of the box and giving people coach trips over so often, which puts a lot of smiles on people's faces. As a committee, we recognise very clearly that there is a lot of work to be done. Voids are not being turned around fast enough, and we need those properties desperately. Repairs should be done first time, one visit, one repair. We're not there yet. Damp and mould is frightening. Where it's come from, all these damp and mould over these years, that's a question we need to answer. Sometimes it's because of the design and the style of the properties. Sometimes it's because people don't understand that if they don't turn their heat on and they try and dry inside, they're going to get condensation. And it's because they can't afford to put their heat on. And there's more and more work has got to be done there. One of the housing officers who's put an awful lot of effort into this, over more years than I've been affected by housing in this city, is about to retire, Janet Sharp. And I would, through you, Lord Mayor, like to give her personally a lot of thanks for everything she's done. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
I'm sure we'd all like to endorse that sentiment about Janet Sharp, that those who've been on the council for a long time have been well aware of Janet's contributions to the council, and perhaps the chief executive would make sure that she receives the message. Thank you. Brian Lodge next.
Thank you, Lord. Put my name on. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Let me just start by saying this is not a criticism of any council staff working in the housing service. My objections to this, the HRA report, is around the policy. It's not ambitious. We keep hearing ambitious for Sheffield, we're ambitious. This is not ambitious for Sheffield tenants and residents. We've got problems with the housing repairs, and we have the chair of the housing committee that says the housing repair service has settled down. That's not the case when you look. There's £1 million in vacancy loss that's in the report, and yet in the questions, members' questions, it highlights it's 500k in the first quarter. So it doesn't match up with the figures in there. We're losing money for managing disrepair claims, an extra over £500,000 to manage disrepair claims. We've gone to consultation with tenants, and it's great, and they're telling us their priorities: repair service, damp, tackling damp and mould, managing disrepair claims. And it says in the report, huge support for priority around improving repairs. The repair service, Councillor Johnson, has not settled down. We have still got thousands and thousands of outstanding repairs, and that's not good enough for the city, for the tenants in this city. And we hear disrepair stories make it to the media. Well, of course they do, because people like their homes to be safe, warm, and somewhere to go to. But if it's in disrepair and we're not dealing with it and then costing a fortune, of course they're going to go to the media, because they're not getting the responses from this council. Bristol is committed to building 1,000 new homes per year, council houses. This council requires 900, the report says over 900 new homes per year. But then you look at it, the business plan highlights we're going to increase by 1,166 by the year 28-29. It's not ambitious. It needs to look at how we can fund things properly. And then we're told this week that Homes England is not providing grant funding because there is a problem with gas safety compliance. That is not ambitious. I can't support this plan. Thank you very much.
I've got Nabila Molana next, then Terry Fox, Mark Jones, Richard Shaw, the speakers I've got on my list.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to echo Councillor Baker's comments and thank Janet Sharp for her years of service to this council. As we have heard many times in this chamber, housing is one of the biggest crises facing this country and our city. We also know housing issues aren't something that exist in a vacuum. They impact our health, our finances, and our ability to get on with our lives. We have long needed a housing revolution, but certainly now more than ever, to see more council and affordable houses built. We need to retrofit all types of housing to tackle the climate crisis. We need to tackle the issues in the private rented sector to drive up the standards of landlord-owned housing. Now, this is a lot of strain to put on the housing revenue account, and it's clear we're asking the HRA to do much more than it can with the economic constraints placed upon it. For 14 years, this Conservative government has presided over a rapid decline in public house building and a rapid decline in our living standards. We need a national solution, a government that starts building again and empowers local authorities to ensure council housing becomes the second largest form of housing tenure in this country. I'm pleased that more houses will be built in our city, that more council homes will be retrofitted, and hope that we can treat this issue with the urgency required and the urgency demanded by our constituents who repeatedly visit us in these galleries. And I really hope that members of all parties will pull together and push for the changes we need, nationally and locally, to meet Sheffield's housing needs. As we hear so often, housing must be a right and not a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Terry Fox.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Well, Mayor, first of all, I want to obviously congratulate our housing staff and the work that they do day in, day out. But what we have to look at, Lord Mayor, is this is the first time I can recall on an HRA where all the three major parties have not put an amendment in. That says to me that everything's going tickety-boo within this budget. And yet we know every day somebody comes up about the issues about housing, whether it's getting a house, whether it's about their repairs, and yet we're comfortable that the report says we need to do 900 homes a year and we accept 1,100. Lord Mayor, that cannot be right. I represent a ward, Lord Mayor, of 15 RSLs. A very small, tiny footprint of council housing, who I hold up as the good comparator. So when people stand in here and talk about affordable homes, I said to you, come and talk to the people on the manor, 10, 11, 12 years on from the votes that they had about leaving and going to some of these RSLs, and they'll tell you about the horror stories of what they're facing, and they want to come back to the council. There's nothing in this report that talks about an avenue for disgruntled residents of this city of how they come back or how they have an opportunity to come back under the umbrella of the council. Lord Mayor, we've seen in this report, and Brian's highlighted in just Bristol, but I said to you, look at Manchester, look at Newcastle, look at how they are borrowing to build homes in their city. Council homes, fit for purpose, and as you all know, because we all go canvassing, we all go knocking on doors, we know the state of our neighbourhoods, and wherever we've got some of these states of our neighbourhoods, if we still comfortable to sit on our laurels and vote for an unambitious plan, then more fool us. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Jones next.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for bringing this forward and the contributions made so far. I don't think there's a single member in this chamber who is happy with the state of housing across Sheffield in general. I think we all want to see better homes. I think we all recognise that. We all deserve to have good homes. It's a basic dignity element that we need to address. More than anything, I think it's really incumbent on us all here, though, to recognise the wider context that we face. Our officers are working in a really difficult environment under really difficult circumstances, and for the most part, they're trying their best. And I think we must make sure that we recognise that our officers within the housing service are going above and beyond to support our citizens and those rent payers. For us that have spoken on housing within this city before, Tom and myself and many, many others, the main issues I have here is the realisation that our tenants are paying rent to have their homes maintained. Yes, we want to see the budgets used to build new houses so our tenants can move on to better properties, and then we can look to fix the old properties. But we also need to make sure that while people are living in those properties, they're maintained appropriately. I'm not entirely sure that's being done. And for me, the biggest issue is that we just simply have not had the funds from central government to support us going forward. And Councillor Baker rightly mentioned about turning up the heating to drive the damp out of your home. We all do that. We all want to see that, but when we've got houses that aren't sufficiently insulated, and when people can't afford to turn the heating on because government is blaming them for being poor, it's not good enough. So we need to look at this budget as we can. We need to do what we can with this budget, and it may not be perfect, but we've got to work with this and take it forward. And going forward, I think we need to do more about focusing on the efficiency of the service, but also taking the message to government that they need to stop driving our citizens into the ground. We need support for our people to be able to heat their homes, feed themselves and clothe their children, all with dignity and all with sense and pride. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I've got Richard Shaw next.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to echo comments from my colleagues earlier about the need not to be complacent and to make sure that where repairs are done, they are done right first time, whether that's making sure that roofs don't floor blocks of maisonettes in low edges, or making sure that In one instance, a year ago, one of my constituents reported a leaking roof that was repaired, not correctly, and they had 6 months of water coming in, which led to them being decanted for another 6 months, while the property was then dried out and back in. So an entire year where tenants with severely vulnerable was out of their home, or their home in a very unlivable condition. So it is very important that we do not get complacent, and that every additional visit that officers have to make to go out and get repairs put right is one too many, and we should get everything right first time as much as possible. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Okay, thank you. From Belvin next.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think we're all aware of the pressure on the housing revenue account and what that means for us in the city. It's leading us to have to make some really difficult decisions, including the rent rises and so on that we are making today. And in those circumstances, I think it's absolutely right that we should be focused on improving our existing stock and make sure we're investing in it. We heard in the answer to Councillor Jones's question earlier on, 5,000 homes, council homes in Sheffield with damp and mould problems just last year. We absolutely have to do that investment, not just to paint over the problems, but to actually invest in the properties and make sure we're addressing the root causes. So investment in stock improvement is absolutely crucial. I think we're all also very used to the fact that we're having to talk to tenants and feel like we're often making excuses for the state of our housing services not being good enough. So this year I do think it's crucial that we start to make some real progress outside of the HRA on some of the other strategies that we're pursuing as a council. That's about the customer experience strategy that means that housing tenants will get a good response, a quick response when they get to us, and will have their problems actually dealt with. It means a digital strategy so that tenants can make transactions online if they want to, quickly and easily. And crucially, it means a housing strategy that will deliver new homes. But that strategy, now that it is sat with SNR and away from the Housing Committee, is making some progress, I'm pleased to say, compared to the last couple of years. And we are looking at strong partnerships with Homes England, with social housing providers and with the private sector that will deliver more affordable homes for our city. So while it might look like we are stepping back the ambition on the HRA because of the problems that we've got funding it, we are still ambitious for our city, and we will deliver more affordable housing.
Thank you. I've just got 2 more speakers, and that will bring us at the time limit. So Sophie Wilson next.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And first of all, I'm sorry to hear about Janet Sharp retiring. I think that will be a real loss to our tenants in Sheffield. I do bring this up every time we talk about housing and our stock, but I just don't think anything that we do will make any difference while we've got the right to buy policy still in force in this country. You know, we can argue here all day, and I completely appreciate what colleagues are saying, and it's not that I have any issues, particularly with this report or what's been proposed. But I think as politicians we are failing our city and our tenants by not properly opposing that. The Labour Party have backtracked on their commitment to end right to buy if they were to come into office during the next general election, which I find very disappointing. When I was the Cabinet Assistant for Housing, I attended 100 years of council housing event in Parliament. It was excellent, and politicians from all sides were declaring their support for ending this policy. So I'm sorry to say that I can't vote for this today while we're not opposing right to buy.
Okay, thank you. And final speaker, Paul Turpin.
Thanks very much. I'd just like to say, in response to my colleague, Councillor Fox, I would say that the reason why this motion has not been amended, it's because it was developed in a cross-party committee system with no overall control, where all parties were included in the development of it, and that's a good thing, and it makes for good policies. Keep hearing this thing, affordable housing. I think it's a real white elephant. Affordable housing that's 10% cheaper than the market rate of the basically equally unaffordable housing in the same place is not the answer or the solution. The only answer to the housing crisis is social housing, not private rented housing, social housing. And therein lies the problem, which Sophie raised. Right to buy needs reform. You know, Sheffield's lost about half of its council housing since Right to Buy came in. There is nobody, in my mind at least, really has the right to stand up and talk about the HRA or building new homes or renovating our homes now whilst supporting the continuation of Right to Buy. Every year, the number of houses that Sheffield loses to Right to Buy diminishes the income. The income for the HRA is rent. And the council is just about almost clinging on with replacing them each year, but it doesn't. It loses them every year. The number of council houses in Sheffield reduces every year because of Right to Buy. And really, there'll be an opportunity for you all to vote on ending or reforming at least the Right to Buy later on, and I hope you'll support us on that. Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Johnson, if you wish to exercise it, it's not compulsory. You'll have a right of reply.
I'll keep it short then, but thanks. I think what's interesting about this is that everyone who's contributed broadly reflects the discussions that go on in the Housing Committee. So that's good. People are broadly on the same page, and we have those discussions every time we meet. There's nothing there we fundamentally disagree with. A couple of things. Certainly the Right to Buy stuff is, you know, incredibly damaging and will be damaging for the future to our housing stock as it has been. We've got an opportunity to start, you know, and join with other authorities in pressing for national level change to that. It's got to be an imperative for government to take action on that. Absolutely credits and thanks to Councillor Milan and Councillor Baker for flagging up the Director of Housing. Janet Sharp is due to retire, but she's not gone yet, so she's still here. Absolute credit to her. But also, actually, I think that Councillor Fox contributed something really revealing, and this is probably a good tribute for Janet Sharp as she retires in the next couple of months. Perhaps I was wrong about this. I neglected the fact that actually the council did sell off through stock transfer some large estates. So we've gone to Sanctuary in Shire Green and quite large chunks of the manor. And it's really helpful to know from Councillor Fox that tenants there are, I think, clamouring was the word used, to come back to the council as landlord. And it reflects what I was saying before about, you know, the standard of council housing. When you look at the rents, you can see why people do want to do that. And it's why I'd like to see that people want to see council housing as the housing of choice, as it should be. So thanks for the contributions there. Obviously, if anyone had any better ideas than what's in here, they'd have put in amendments. So thanks for that.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm now going to move to the vote on the motion, which, unless we have unanimous support, will be done by the electronic voting. Is the motion agreed? Dissent. Right, we'll move to the electronic voting system, please. Okay, I've got 70, that's right, we now have 70 registered, and there's one person still to vote, 2 people still to vote, One person still to vote. I voted. 71 here.
We should have 73.
Well,
How many have we got today?
this is 73.
Just so I know.
Okay, that's it. We've got everybody who's registered to vote. The motion is carried. 63 votes in favour, 8 votes against. So that is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, we're now going to move on to the last part of the meeting, notice of motions. I'm going to hand over and leave you in the very capable hands of the Deputy Lord Mayor, Councillor Jane Dunn. Making a debut. Come on, Jane.
Thank you. Right, thank you. Quite apt that I'm taking over as it is a National Apprentice Week. So I'm doing it at the highest level for Sheffield today. Right, so item number 8 is notice of motion regarding extending the Household Support Fund. There is a maximum time limit of 25 minutes for this item. May I call on Councillor Dorndale to move the motion? You may speak for up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I bring this motion today with a high level of concern for the citizens of Sheffield and annoyance at the government. The motion sets out the main points of which we must ask the government to reconsider their decision to end the Household Support Fund in March. The government has decided to end the funding for the Household Support Fund from the end of March, and we should be concerned that they did not use the autumn statement or the local government finance settlement to confirm an extension of the fund. In Sheffield, we received £10.4 million for the Household Support Fund, which has been used to provide financial support to low-income and vulnerable households who are struggling to afford the very basics required to meet a safe and healthy standard of living. The support the Council has provided through the Household Support Fund has helped tens of thousands of households in Sheffield who have struggled to afford energy, food and other essentials. Speaking as the Chair of the Education, Children and Families Policy Committee, I can share that the fund is used to provide free school meals vouchers for 32,000 households during the school holidays. So what does the government withdrawing the fund mean to those families at a time when there is no sign of the cost of living easing? Prices are not reducing and those who I speak to are not earning any more money. There simply isn't enough money coming into households to be able to afford the basics. The benefit of the vouchers is huge, despite it being a small amount per child each week. The vouchers are in place to replace the free school meal that children benefit from in term time. But many children who are entitled to free school meals also access school breakfast clubs, which are free. So families actually need to replace 2 meals per day per child. Those with lived experience that I have spoken to have told me that during term time, they do not have their gas and electricity on when their children are not home, as they can't afford it, and that they struggle with things like transport costs to the job centre and to medical appointments, and the fear of household items such as fridges, cookers and washers breaking, and children coming home with a hole in their coat, tip a family over the edge into unmanageable high cost and sometimes dangerous debt through loan sharks. The level of despair amongst some of our communities is impacting on long-term mental health and creating an environment where our children are experiencing adverse childhood experiences. Deputy Lord Mayor, speaking as an advocate for our children and young people, how can we expect them to have a happy and healthy childhood when they are hungry, and witnessing levels of stress within their home due to their family being unable to find a way despite all of their best efforts to provide the basics. We know that the Council is doing a lot to build our economy and improve opportunities for citizens to flourish and grow and to support families out of poverty.
Thank you, Councillor Dale.
If I could just finish, please. But the support fund allows families to stress less at times of crisis and focus on opportunities for their future outcomes. So as chair of this committee, I've written to the government to call on the for the household support fund to be extended, as I believe ending the fund will reduce vital support for people in our city and need it most and create generational trauma for decades to come.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Councillor Dale. Thank you. May I call on Councillor MILSOM to second the motion? You can speak up to 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. Children fainting from hunger, poor concentration, mental health struggles, rickets, scurvy, malnutrition, stunted growth, tooth decay, stealing food from classmates' lunchboxes. It sounds Dickensian, but these are all realities right now in 2024, in the 14th year of austerity. 200 years ago, Charles Dickens left school aged 12 to work in a factory when his father, who had a respectable job in the public sector, was sent to debtor's prison. How horrified would Dickens be now to see the stark inequalities he knew all too well then repeated today? The government tells our NHS to reduce health inequalities and prioritise preventing ill health, withdrawing cost of living support at the same time that prevents the biggest driver of health inequality, which of course is poverty. Treating malnutrition costs an estimated 16.2 billion in England per year. The biggest cause of hospital admissions in 6 to 10-year-olds is tooth decay, and this is 3 times more likely in deprived households. Deprivation is also a cause of obesity, whilst referrals to acute mental health services are 57% higher for children in poverty. These statistics go on, and the figures capture the picture actually before the cost of living crisis. Hospital admissions are expensive. It costs a lot to keep people in poverty. The Household Support Fund currently totals £842 million. You could have 19 household support funds for the price of treating malnutrition alone. It's absolutely right that Councillor Dale and Councillor Hunt have written to the Chancellor and Prime Minister asking for the Household Support Fund to be extended, and I'm sure we will all unite behind them in calling on the government to do the right thing.
Thank you, Councillor Milson. There are 2 proposed amendments, and these are numbers 1 and 2 on the list of amendments circulated at the meeting. May I call on Councillor Tim Huggan to move amendment number 1. You may speak for up to 2 minutes. Councillor Huggan.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and also congratulations on our newest councillor, my friend Will Sapwell. The cost of living and its impact, the cost of living support and its impact has been part of the Liberal Democrat strategy for a long time, and I doubt anybody in this chamber is not troubled by the cliff edge many of our residents face. Though I have to look at Labour's record in Sheffield when they were sole control, when they failed to pay the free school meal vouchers in time so that many children went hungry and parents were left in debt. So what's happened here in this motion? So the Chair of Education has written to Minister, and what has been the response? I mean, it would be good if we had some, or is it a case of gaslighting by Labour again? I note that there are no new calls or commitments to anything beyond calling for the existing arrangements, or even unasked for a future government for anything. Just a call for clarity. I suppose this is part of the edict from the London Labour policies of Sheffield Labour to do nothing and say nothing, no commitments, no monetary values to alleviate the cost of living in the future, a cost of living crisis in the future. Just a letter, and it's a good job it's not being sent to a minister in S10 because it would never get there.
otherwise. The work of the Liberal Democrat-led South West area local area committee is doing its job to try and ameliorate some of this pressure, and to use some of its limited resources on cost of living has been well spent, I believe. I commend the Liberal Democrat amendment to this council.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Huggan. May I call on Councillor Curtis Crossland to second the amendment?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I was very eager to second this amendment because I grew up in a family that relied on child benefits. My mum wasn't well enough to work, my dad was a full-time carer, so with 4 kids and 3 of us being disabled, it wasn't easy. And this might come as a surprise for many people in this room, but back then I was so close to backing Labour. Don't put that on any leaflets, please. Because the rhetoric has always been that Labour would look out for people like me. But if you sit and watch the Labour Party for long enough, you see a pattern starting to emerge. They always turn their back on the people they claim to support. Scrapping the 2-child limit, U-turn. Scrapping private school charity status, U-turn. Scrapping income tax for the top 5%, U-turn. Freedom of movement, U-turn. Green prosperity plan, U-turn. I know Keir Starmer isn't the most energising of speakers, but I think he's taken his sat-nav impression a little bit too far. Yeah. So, for a party that is meant to be socialist, where is your social conscience? You don't speak for people like me who grew up on benefits. It's not Sir Keir Starmer, it's Sir Kid Starver. So, I think that there will actually be a lot of members in this room who support this amendment. But it's their chance to do the right thing for Sheffield and not the London Labour Party. So who are you going to support? The people in Sheffield or Sir Kid Starver from London?
Well, thank you, Councillor Crossland. May I call on Councillor Maroof Rahoof to move the amendment number 2? You may speak for up to 2 minutes. I said under then, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. The proposed removal of the HSF is nothing short of a catastrophe waiting to happen. It's a reckless decision that will plunge the most vulnerable members of our society into even greater hardship, especially many of my constituents in Netheredge and Sharrow. Recently, I heard the case of Mary, name changed, an elderly, disabled and housebound woman with no family near her. After a long hospital stay, she returned home to find only a packet of biscuits and a ready meal in her kitchen. The HSF stepped in, providing her with an emergency food shop, nutritious meals for 2 months, and referrals to advice teams to help her with benefits and energy bills. Without the HSF, what would happen to people like Mary? Where would she turn to for help? Would Mary get any help at all? The HSF, which is set to end next month, provided 62% for local welfare assistance in 2022. Its removal would be devastating for local welfare services and the people that rely on them, those in our society who need the most help. It would mean more people going hungry, going cold and losing their homes. Its removal will lead to a significant gap in the provision of local crisis support. Rapid help to people experiencing financial crisis will become limited. This will be devastating for those that need it. The HSF is a positive policy as it gives our council the flexibility to address acute local needs and individual circumstances that are not covered by the benefit system. It has been instrumental in addressing bed poverty, situations where parents give up their own beds so their children have somewhere to sleep. With the removal of the HSF, families will have to prioritise essentials like food, warmth and lecky over things like replacing mouldy bedding or fixing a broken bed for their child. Given many cities have seen a rise in crisis requests for help with children's beds and bedding, increasing from 4,000 in 2019 to 18,000 in 2022, the removal of the HSF will mean that we struggle to meet these growing needs. This is a relatively decent motion by the Reds for once, especially given their recent history of motions and amendments.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. May I call on Councillor Angela Argenzio to second the amendment? You have up to 2 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. First of all, I want to say thank you to the officers in the cost of living team in the council that deliver most of the household support fund. They are very responsive and they've helped a number of my constituents. They not only address the crisis situation that people may find themselves in, but they also advise for the long term with support to maximise income. They are really brilliant. Deputy Lord Mayor, whilst I agree and support what is in the motion and the amendments, I am angry and frustrated that there is a need for such a motion. That in this day and age we are normalising food banks as support for people in poverty in one of the richest countries on the planet. The gap between the have and the have-nots is widening and social justice is worsening year on year. What we need is a national government with a moral conscience. In fact, we need a government with a conscience, so full stop. A government that has the courage to properly fund local services, local authorities, the local NHS, and is prepared to support those most in need. According to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation 2023 report, approximately 3.8 million people experienced destitution in 2022, including around 1 million children. Things are getting worse. I've had several constituents who have accessed the fund, and it does not only affect children. I had a constituent on universal credit, having no money for their electric and gas meters, and therefore was not able to warm up the food given to them by the food bank. They couldn't even boil the kettle to make themselves a cup.
Thank you, Councillor Genzio.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We can now move on to the matter of the debate. I have had indicated Councillor Uller. Councillor Uller, you have up to 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and thank you for allowing me to speak on this very important motion. Dad, I'm hungry. Dad, I'm hungry. In the middle of the cost of living crisis, not a penny in my pocket, pushing a child off to school. It must be unbearable. Deputy Lord Mayor, the Household Support Fund provides free school meal vouchers to over 32,000 low-income households in Sheffield during school holidays. If this important fund is discontinued, the negative impact on Sheffield's residents cannot be understated. It is a vital resource for those who are grappling with food insecurity. This fund reduces the risk of hunger, malnutrition, and isolation. Drawing closer to my ward, Netherrating in Sharrow, nearly half of 2-year-olds are eligible for free early learning, and one-fifth receive free school meals. During the last Christmas holidays, children in my ward who were eligible for this fund not only enjoyed a wide range of fun activities, they also received nutritious food for free. So I hope colleagues in this chamber join us to send a clear message to the out of touch and soon out of time and out of office government that we need this fund to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Uller. Councillor Little. You have up to 2 minutes to speak. Yes.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Mine will be very short. Of course, anyone with any conscience would support any measure to prevent people going into being in poverty or even worse, into deprivation and living on the streets. My question, though, is, are we going to see any more money from the next government when we know full well that these Tory made-up fiscal rules that Rachel Reeves is going to stick to will provide any more money at all, because they are committed, as I understand it, all the opposition parties are, to balance the budget rather than provide any more money. Can we have that insurance that we will all oppose that draconian, unnecessary policy? Because we need the money to do the right thing for the people who live in our beautiful city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Little. Councillor Laura McLean, you have up to 2 minutes, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Recently, I have been speaking with some of the head teachers in Walkley, the ward I represent. They spoke of families that are still under extreme pressure from the cost of living crisis. They highlighted that this winter, many have been struggling to afford essentials, not just food, but things like gloves, footwear and coats. The holiday free school meal vouchers are still desperately needed to alleviate the burdens many families are facing. Astonishingly, this week the Prime Minister has claimed that pressures on struggling households are starting to ease. It is clear once again that the very real issues facing people in our city are just not on his agenda, as he and his government continue to actively turn their backs on those most in need by ending the Household Support Fund. I call on members to support this motion, calling on the government to think again and extend this vital fund beyond March. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor McLean. Councillor Williams, would you like to speak? You have up to 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. On Monday, I had the opportunity to attend the Start for Life Health and Wellbeing launch. And one of the messages that came out was the importance of first 1,001 days for a new child. Basically, what happens to that child in those 1,001 first days will go with them for the rest of their lives. It will dictate their outcomes, where they will be, and what type of person they will become. If this money is taken away, it will have a significant impact, not this year, not next year, but for the rest of their lives. And I think it's a tragedy. So we have to support this motion, and I would ask this House to also support the Lib Dem amendment to get rid of the cap on the 2 childs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm really appreciating the brevity. We're getting through a lot of speakers. Can't keep pace. Right, it's Councillor Rooney. I'm going to give you the floor for up to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'm absolutely furious at the contributions by Councillor Crossland and, well, I've forgotten his name, right? Because all you did was make sarcastic remarks and innuendos, and on a couple of occasions, Councillor Crossland actually laughed. And at no stage during either of your speeches did you mention the Tories. You spent both of your speeches simply having a go at the Labour Party. Now, I will remind you, and you're not going to like this, 2010, you were on about people letting people down. Millions of people in this country voted Liberal Democrat and ended up with a Tory government, and we've had them ever since. So if you want to start talking about blame, put your hand up and say it's our fault, because you conned people into voting Liberal Democrat, i.e. a false promise about fees for kids going to university. You conned people into voting for you, and they all ended up with a Tory government. So do you want to apologise to the people of this country for leading them down a disastrous path? We're dealing with the here and now, and at no stage, the only person that's actually... You can shout at me all you want. I've been here long enough to take it. Don't worry. You don't worry me. The only person that made a reasonable contribution from the Liberal Democrat side was Councillor Williams. The other two simply used it to have a go at the Labour Party. But then again, what's new? That's all you're interested in. You're not interested in putting the blame where it lies, which is with the Tories. The sickening thing about all of this is that
Councillor Rooney. Thank you, Councillor Rooney.
No, they interrupted me.
No.
The sickening thing about
Councillor
this
Rooney,
is that
please
this
sit down.
household support fund shouldn't exist. It only exists because of the
Councillor
poverty
Rooney, please
that the
sit
Tories have inflicted on the people of this, this country.
I'm going to call on Councillor Baker, please.
Beat
Thank
that.
Right. So, thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and thank you for bringing this notice of motion. It highlights a number of things that we're extremely concerned about, and as you know, we have added an addition. The addition is on the two-child cap of child benefit. And one of the anomalies of the two-child cap is the fact that if you have a single child and then you have twins or triplets, you still only get the 2 children family allowance. I know that, because that's in my own family that happens. It's important for a lot of reasons that the two-child gap goes, and that we spend time and money, as Councillor Williams have said, supporting our children in their early age. The increased time that children spend with mental health issues and supports that schools have to give to children who have difficult times at home through the pressures of lack of heat, lack of food, and parents who themselves have mental health issues. It is interesting that that support comes to them from the education system and not actually from the GPs. But they're the ones who are doing it, and we should thank them for that role. And I repeat, Deputy Lord Mayor, thank you for bringing this notice of motion, and please support our amendment.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Baker. We're now approaching the 25 minutes. I'm going to move on to Councillor Dorndale for a right to reply, if you so wish. You have up to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Do I ever wish for a right to reply? I'm quite as angry as Councillor Rooney, but intend to keep my decorum in the chamber today. Councillor Williams, thank you for your support on this motion. You are working in an area where our family hubs and truly do understand the impact that this has. Councillor Huggan, I was truly inspired by your passion and concern for our most vulnerable citizens. I have not had a response yet, but in the spirit of cross-party working, I will publish that response for all members to see. Councillor Crossland, I am the people that have suffered. I have my own lived experience of not having any gas and electricity and sitting with a newborn in a blanket because I couldn't keep the house warm. But this is not a poverty off. We are not sat in this chamber pitching against one another to decide who's been the poorest and who is the right party or person to stand and defend the people that are struggling at the moment. We all have that responsibility, despite party colours, and I find it abhorrent that you've taken it down that path today. I'm shocked, but not surprised, in the tone that's come into this chamber today, because the Liberal Democrats have a track record when it comes to children's free school meal vouchers, don't they, Sheffield? When you called on Labour to provide extra free school meal vouchers, knowing that that's what we were going to do anyway, and that is on video and being shared on social media. So I'm really shocked, but not surprised, that the Liberal Democrats have taken this opportunity today to take political potshots across this chamber rather than coming together and standing for the most vulnerable in the city. So with that in mind, I ask that members across this chamber support this motion and prevent the cliff edge in March. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Dale. I am now going to move to the vote on amendment number 1, moved by Councillor Tim Huggan, and which will be conducted using the electronic vote system unless we have unanimous support for the amendment. Okay. Is amendment number 1 agreed? Okay. I will take silence as affirmation of the
Dissent.
dissent. Sorry, couldn't hear. I'm slightly deaf. Okay. So, a vote shall be conducted using the electronic voting system. Oh, yeah.
Alan?
It will be electronic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm just trying to sort out. I do apologise. Yeah.
Alan? Can we put it on the screens?
Yeah. We also...
No, you don't need that.
Okay, just to remind you, you're voting on amendment number 1. Yeah.
We've gone wobbly.
Whoa!
We've reset it. We're voting on amendment number 1. We don't have unanimous support. We have dissent. So therefore, we're using the electronic voting system. Are we all clear? Thank you. We've still got 3 people who haven't who've registered but haven't voted. Okay, we've just got 2 people who haven't voted. Shall I call it? Okay. Right, we have a result, okay? There's 45 for the amendment and 22 against.
No abstention.
And 2 abstentions.
No, 22.
Was that right? So that is carried. So that is carried. We're now going to amendment number 2. I'm going to move to the amendment on this. This is moved by Councillor Maruf Rahoof, which will be conducted using the electronic voting system unless we have unanimous support for the amendment. Just 1 second. Yeah. Is amendment number 2 agreed? Agreed? I can see that Councillor...
Deputy Lord Mayor, we would like to vote in parts, please. In voting for, we will be voting for clause 1 and abstaining on clause 2.
Voting for clause 1 and abstaining. Okay, that's great. Okay. Okay, Ruth.
Deputy Lord Mayor, we're voting the same way, voting for but abstaining on 2.
Okay.
So we still need to run the electronic vote.
Okay. Okay, has everybody voted? Apparently not. We've got 2 people registered that still haven't voted.
Now got 70 members.
Okay, that's fine. I think we're having problems with 2 of the consoles, but we know about that. Okay, so the recorded vote is 68, so the amendment is carried. Thank you. We're now going to move on to the substantive. Are we concentrating, everybody? We're now going to move on to the vote of the substantive motion, which will be conducted using the electronic voting system, unless we have unanimous support for the motion. Okay. Councillor Milsom. We're going on to the substantive.
Yeah, so I think we need to vote in parts, because my understanding is that was carried, the last amendment in full. So we'll vote for now the amended substantive motion, but abstain on anything added by Amendment 1 or Amendment 2 that we voted against before, or abstain not before.
Okay, thank you.
Paul's got it in writing.
Yeah, Councillor Rookland.
Thank you. With the same thing again, but my understanding was that clause 2 of the Green amendment didn't pass. Oh, because we abstained. So we will abstain again.
Thank you. Okay. Are we all... 4. Okay. Are we all right to move? We still need to run the electronic vote. Okay. Thank you. Oh, come on, can I have a full house? Or you need 1 more to vote? Thank you very much. Okay, we have 74. Okay, so that motion is, that substantive is carried. Thank you. We're now going to move on to motion item number 9, which we are going to take formally as we've reached the guillotine. That's it, I've got that little bit right, okay. So may I call on Councillor Sophie Thornton to move the motion?
Formally moved, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Councillor Mike Levery to second.
Formally moved, Deputy Lord Mayor.
There are 2 proposed amendments, and these are numbers 3 and 4 on the list. These have been circulated at the meeting. May I call on Councillor Fran Belbin to formally move the amendment?
Formally moved, Lord Mayor.
And Councillor Zahira Naz to formally second.
Formally second.
Thank you. May I call on... Oh, sorry, I lost my microphone. May I call on Councillor Douglas Johnson to move amendment number 4?
Formally moved.
Councillor Brian Holmshaw to second.
Formally seconded, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. The Deputy, but thank you.
Apologies, Deputy Lord Mayor.
It's fine, thank you very much. Okay. Not really, I keep making mistakes. It's not very easy, but you've been quite nice to me, so thank you. I'm now going on to move to the vote on the amendment number 3, which is moved by Councillor Fran Belbin, which will be conducted using the electronic voting system, unless we have unanimous support for the amendment.
Lord Mayor, can I vote? We'd like to vote in parts. So in voting for, we are voting against 2O and 2Q, and for the rest. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we can now move ahead to the vote. Thank you. Okay, we have 36 for, 26 against and 6 abstentions. It was carried in parts. 2O and 2A were lost. The rest has gone through. Thank you. 2Q, sorry, not O, Q. See, can't read. So we're now on amendment number... Okay, we're now on amendment number 4. I'm going to move to the vote on this. Do we have any dissent, or can we move to the vote? Dissent, okay. Councillor Auckland.
It's Alston, but I'll let you off. It's all right. So, for amendment number 4, we're voting against, but for clause 3 and clause 5T, and we're abstaining on clause 5U.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Milsom.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. We are voting for, but abstaining on 1.
Okay, we'll go ahead to the vote. Okay, we've got 3 that haven't voted. Does nobody want to go and watch Idris Elba? Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, we've lost Shafak and Move.
Honestly, you're disappearing. I know we'd all like to be with yeah. And I think if we got a vote on that, we'd all vote unanimously, wouldn't we? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I think I will call this then. So we have 36 for, 25 against, 6 abstention and 1 person who's floating around somewhere. Okay, so this is carried in part. Part 1 was lost and all the rest was carried. Thank you. We are now going to move on to the substantive motion, which will be conducted using the electronic voting unless we have unanimous support for the motion. Do we have unanimous support? Dissent. Okay, thank you very much. I'll call you Mrs. Alba now.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. In voting for, we are abstaining on clause N from the Labour text, which I think went through, and we are against clauses O and Q from the Labour text, but I'm not sure they actually went through. And we're voting as above, as when we voted on the amendment, in terms of the clauses from the Green amendment.
Councillor Milsom.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. We are voting, I'll cover all bases, bear with if I've lost the plot. We're voting for, but against any of parts L, O, P that remain after amending, and abstaining on the new paragraph added by Amendment 4 if that was passed.
Thank you, Councillor Milsom. Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. In voting for, we're voting against L of the substantive motion, O2 and Q2, and we're abstaining on any parts of the amendments 3 and 4 that were carried as we did before.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now go ahead to the electronic vote. Thank you. Has anybody else left? Because this is like shrinking numbers every time I look at it. This is carried in full. The fine detail of the very complicated in and outs will be made clear tomorrow morning. I've just been told by my lovely assistant, Paul. So thank you very much. Move on to item number 10, which is a notice of motion regarding 5 years since declaring a climate emergency. I will call on Councillor Paul Turpin to move the motion formally.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. This part of the motion was amended by officers in the first place to remove a request for the top 4 or 5 tiers of officers to undertake the trade as well. Due to an oversight, I've now been asked to change it again, which I don't really mind doing, except because I actually do sit on the Member Development Working Group. It feels a little circular and silly, but all the same, Deputy Lord Mayor, please may I alter the text to the text printed here, suggested by our fine officers.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Okay, can I call on Councillor ALEXI? Sorry. No. Councillor Diamond, would you like to formally...
I shall now formally move the amended motion, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Diamond, would you like to formally second the motion, please?
Formally seconded,
Thank
Deputy
you.
Lord Mayor.
Okay. Could I call on... There are 2 proposed amendments, and these are numbers 5 and 6, and the list of amendments are circulated at the meeting. May I call on Councillor Minesh Parrott to formally move the amendment number 5?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. In formally moving this motion, I've been told the whips had a discussion beforehand and wanted to remove the word other from 2D in other measures. So in formally moving the amendment, I would like to remove the word other.
Accepted, thank you. Okay, may I call on Councillor Craig Gamble-Pugh to second the amendment?
Urgently seconded, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. Okay, may I call on Councillor Andrew Sangar, sorry for marrying you off so much today, on to amendment number 6.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'm in the same position as Councillor Turpin in the sense that I would like to move my amendment with the exception of clause 8. So we're just going to remove clause 8 and not propose it. Same issue in terms of the way the motion amendments are. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Rees.
Formally seconded with an apology for Democratic Services for putting you through this.
Thank you very much. We can now move on to vote on the amendment number 5, moved by Councillor Parrott, which will be conducted using the electronic voting system unless we have unanimous support for the amendment. Do we have unanimous support? Dissent. Oh. Thank you. Councillor Phipps.
Thanks, Deputy Lord Mayor. So in voting in parts, in voting for this, we're voting against 2F, 4K, 5 and 6. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Alston.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. In voting for this, we are voting against 2E, 2F, 4J and 5.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Same combination as the Greens.
Do I have any more? Okay, no. So we shall move ahead to the vote electronically. Thank you. We have, this amendment is carried, 67 votes for, with 2F and 5 which were lost. Thank you. We'll move on to amendment number 5, which we need to take. Do we have dissent on this? I'm looking out. Councillor MILSOM. Number 6. So sorry, my fault. I do apologise.
So, has this been moved? Yeah. So amendment 6, we're in voting against. We are for 3, and for the additional paragraph under 5, but not the deletion in 5, and we are for 7.
Thank you. Any more? Okay, so we can move ahead to the vote. Right, this motion is carried in parts. It was 32 for, 35 against. I will caveat this. 3 and 7 were carried. 5J as additional and not deleted. Is that correct? Spot on. Thank you. 5. Thank you. We'll now move on to the substantive motion. I'm going to move to the vote unless we have dissent. Thank you. Councillor Alston.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. We will be voting for, but with the as above, basically. So the bits we voted against, if they're still in, we'll vote against them again.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Phipps.
Yeah, sounds good. Can we do that? So we'll vote for it, but we'll vote against the parts of the Labour amendment we voted against before, 2F, 4K, 5 and 6, and against the bits from the Lib Dem amendment that got through. Thanks.
Thank you. We have that recorded. Councillor MILSOM.
Okay, so in voting for, we're voting against D, F, I and N for November, and abstaining on G and H, and against any parts of Amendment 6 that we previously voted against, which might have passed.
Fine. Okay. Okay. We can move on to the vote. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, this motion is carried. The fine detail will be released tomorrow morning, I'm assured. Okay, we'll now move on to notice of motion number 11, which is the one regarding the number of council homes and the quality of existing stock. May I call on Councillor Downs to formally move the motion? Can I call on Councillor Hurst to formally second the motion, please?
Formally seconded, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you. There are 3 proposed amendments, and these are numbers 7, 8 and 9. And the list of the amendments have been circulated at the meeting. May I call on Councillor Nabila Molam to formally move the amendment number 7?
Formally moved, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Ben Miskell to formally second the amendment?
Move formally, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor.
May I call on Penny Baker to formally move amendment number 8?
Formally moved, Lord Mayor.
And Councillor Sophie Thornton to formally second the amendment.
Formally seconded, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Okay. And the third amendment is Councillor Douglas, amendment number 9, Councillor Douglas Johnson.
Formally moved, Deputy Lord Mayor.
And Councillor Henry Nottage.
Formally seconded, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Okay, we will now move to the vote. We're going to move on the amendment number 8, is that right? 7, amendment number 7. Oh, do we have, no we don't, I can see already. Thank you, Councillor Alston.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. So for Amendment 7, in voting against, we will abstain on Clause 1.
Councillor Phipps.
Thanks, Deputy Lord Mayor. So, in voting for, we are voting against 2H and 2I. Thanks.
Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. In voting for, we are voting against 2G and 2I.
Okay, so we will move to the vote. Okay, with just one person who hasn't voted, or has somebody else disappeared off? Oh, Sophie's gone. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor McGowan. Okay, this amendment was carried in parts, 41 and 4 and 24 against. 1 and 2G were carried, 2H and 2I were lost. Thank you. We'll move on to voting on amendment number 8.
No, it's no worries. Okay, so Amendment 8. So in voting for, we are voting against 2 and 3. Thank you.
Now move to the vote. No? Yes? Okay, this has been carried in parts. 1 and 4 were carried, and 2 and 3 are lost. And it was 37 for, 29 against. Thank you. Amendment number 9. Can we go to the vote, or do we have dissent? Dissent. Councillor Alston.
So Amendment number 9, in voting for, we are in favour of Clause 1 and against Clause 2.
Councillor Hurst.
Lord Mayor, voting in parts. In voting for, we are against 2.
Councillor Milsom.
Deputy Lord Mayor, we're voting for 1 but against 2. So in voting for, we're voting against 2.
Okay, we will now go to the vote. Right, quite straightforward apparently. Part 1 is carried and part 2 is lost. Thank you. Right, we're now on to the substantive. Do we have dissent or can we move? Councillor Milsom.
Thank you. In voting for, we're still against any bits that we voted against previously.
Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Obviously, we're voting for the substantive motion, but we're voting against any parts of 7, 8 and 9 as according to our other earlier instructions.
Because we can.
Thank you. Councillor Alston.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. In voting for, we're also voting against those bits that we voted against, but I think that was just clause 2 of the Green motion, which I don't think passed. And specifically, we are voting in favour of FI in the original motion. F1, sorry. Yeah, FI.
Thank you. We can go to the vote because he's for it. Thank you. Okay, this is carried and the fine detail will be out tomorrow. Thank you. Okay, item number 12, which is motion number 12, review the procedure for dealing with standards, complaints and councillor conduct. This item of business is to approve proposed revisions to the procedure for dealing with standards, complaints and proposed changes to the Councillor Code of Conduct, following a review of the procedure and code by the Audit and Standards Committee at its meeting held on the 23rd of November 2023. A report of the General Counsel on this matter has been published with the agenda for this meeting. This motion is to approve the changes to the procedure with dealing with standards, complaints and the Councillor Code of Conduct as outlined in sections 3.1 and 3.2 of the report and as set out in appendices A and B. The motion is to be moved by Councillor Mohammed Maroof, Chair of the Audit and Standards Committee, and seconded by Councillor Fran Belbin, the Deputy Chair of the Committee. Councillor Maroof.
Formally proposed, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Councillor Belbin.
Formally seconded, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Is the motion agreed? Crikey, thank you so much. Okay, so that motion is passed. Thank you. That's carried, sorry, wrong word. Okay, item number 13 is the appointment of independent persons and co-opted members of the Audit and Standards Committee. And I think this a gentleman here from that committee. Welcome. Sorry it took so long to get here. Thank you. This item of business is to approve the appointment of 2 independent persons and assist the monitoring officer in dealing with standards complaints and to appoint 1 non-voting co-opt member of the Audit and Standards Committee to oversee and assess the Council's risk of management, control and corporate governance arrangements. It's also recommended that the term of the current non-voting co-op member of the Audit and Standards Committee be extended for a further 2 years. I need some water. These proposed appointments have been recommended following the recruitment exercises recently undertaken, and further details on these matters are to be set out in the report of the General Counsel, which has been published with the agenda for this meeting. The motion is to A, approve the appointment of David Irvine and Martin Thorpe as independent persons for a term of 4 years to the end of the municipal year in 2028. B, approve the appointment of James Brackley as a non-voting co-opt member of the Audit and Standards Committee for a term of 4 years to the end of the municipal year in 2028. And C, approve the extension of the term of Alison Howard, the current non-voting co-opt member of the Audit and Standards Committee, for a further 4 years to the end of the municipal year 2028. The motion is to be moved by Councillor Mohammed Maroof, the Chair of the Audit and Standards Committee, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Fran Belbin, the Deputy Chair of the Committee. Councillor Maroof.
Formally Deputy Lord Mayor.
Councillor Belbin.
Formally seconded, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Is the motion agreed? Thank you. I will, yeah. So that is passed. Okay. Right, item number 14 is the minutes of the previous council meetings. It is proposed that the minutes of the ordinary meetings of the council held on the 1st of November and 6th of December 2023 be approved as true and accurate records, and that a footnote be inserted into the minutes of the meeting of the 6th of December under the subparagraph B and 4 of the resolution in the item 10 on the banning of single-use vapes on environmental and health grounds, suggested that, to be more accurately reflect the collaborative approach of the work in question, the words "working alongside public health" should have been included in the text, and after the words Sheffield Youth Cabinet. Is this motion formally approved? Councillor Mary Lee.
Yeah, formally, Lord Mayor.
Is this motion formally seconded? With Councillor Otton or Councillor Milsom, but Councillor Otton's not here. Can we declare the motion carried? Thank you very much. Item number 15, members of the council, bodies and representatives to serve on other bodies. And all right, okay. And okay, it is moved by Councillor Mary Lee, seconded by Councillor Sue Alston, that approval be given to the changes in the membership of committees and other council bodies and the appointment of representatives to serve on external bodies and related issues, as detailed in the schedule circulated at the meeting. Councillor Lee.
Formally, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Councillor Alston.
Formally second, Lord Mayor.
Is this motion agreed? Thank you. Does that conclude? Okay. So this concludes the business of today's meeting. Thank you all for your attendance.